Hey everyone, Amiya here from Resonance Astrology, and I'm joined today by Sev, and we're gonna record the Saturn episode today. And just for information, it's January 30th at around 5:37 p.m. Central European Time, and this is part of the Meet the Planet series, which is all about really meeting the planets on a very fundamental, practical, but also kind of mystical and philosophical level. And we want you to be able to walk away with something tangible, like really knowing what to do with Saturn. And I think this is really a planet that I think a lot of people are going to be interested in because Saturn tends to get quite the bad rap, if I may say, unjustifiably. And we really hope that we can ease you into this a bit and also make you realize how important Saturn is in most of our lives and how it's also showing up in so many good ways, not just the unpleasant ways. I mean, all the planets are doing that in their respective ways in our lives. So, this is what we're going to talk about today, and I'm going to let Sev introduce himself now.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here talking about the scariest traditional planet of all time. My name is Sev. I am at abyssarcanum on Instagram, and that is the name that I work under as an astrologer, as a diviner and tarot reader. I'm also a death doula in training, and a death worker and hospice volunteer. So Saturn is kind of my sweet spot. I love thinking and talking about this stuff. And yeah, I can't wait to dive in.
Yes, and I will ask you for your Saturn credentials, just
Yeah,
so we know. I mean, I know it's like even just super present in your work, and I believe if you can show your Saturn tattoo,
right
that
there.
is right there.
I
But
was trying to play it cool by wearing a turtleneck, but I do have a Saturn neck tattoo. Yeah, I'll show my Saturn card. So I have a really challenging Saturn. I have Saturn in Aries, and it is ruled by Mars in Libra, and they are directly opposing each other. So really, I am no stranger to the very real difficulties of Saturn. And that Saturn, pretty much everything in my chart, almost all of my personal planets aside from Mars and Saturn are in Capricorn and Aquarius. All of them are. So all of my personal placements basically route back to that very debilitated and maltreated Saturn. And so, as a way to work with that planet, I have really had to kind of um, take pains in remediating it. And I am very conscious of how that shows up in my life and conscious of building a relationship with Saturn because otherwise, it's not going to be very helpful to me. So, yeah, and also I'm a Leo rising and my ascendant is ruled by my Saturnian sun in Aquarius. So, there's really no escaping Saturn for me as much as I try, but that's the nature of Saturn, I guess, in and of itself.
yeah, I have similar credentials to the extent that I mean, first of all, my Saturn is also in Aries. We both know what a debilitated
Oh
Saturn feels
boy.
like.
Yes.
We're also both heading in our Saturn return, so that's going to be very interesting.
Yeah.
I feel like there could almost be like a recording this now and recording the same episode, like three
No, I think
years
we should
after
circle
Saturn
back.
return.
When Saturn moves into Taurus, we'll meet back here. We'll debrief for sure.
hmm So, yeah, Saturn is most definitely super present in our lives right now, transit wise. I mean, obviously, right now, Saturn is still in Pisces, but it's
Right.
happening very, very soon.
Yeah.
And I'm a Scorpio rising. I'm ruled by Mars and Capricorn, but that's a mutual reception where the Saturn in Aries and pretty much all my planets answer back to that dynamic as well. So
Totally.
it's a malefic signature that is
We're
present in.
malefic as
Yep.
hell over here for sure. Yeah. Which is hysterical. Um, yeah, it's crazy, but I feel like on the episodes that I've seen of your podcast, you often have people with kind of like non-traditional
Yep.
placements in planetary placements talking about these planets, and I feel like everybody always talks about how now having a planet in fall or like debilitated or in detriment, actually kind of tends to give you a broader perspective because if you have a really domiciled planet or like a planet that's really baked into your chart and feeling at home and feeling really safe, it kind of blends into the background. So I count my blessings for now, for my Saturn and Aries, but I'll see you back here in 2 years, you know, weeping over what has transpired potentially, and ruining my own words for sure.
Oof.
But yeah, I think that it gives, a tough Saturn definitely gives you a leg up in terms of being able to kind of objectively see and experience the planet overall.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is also a perfect segue into the first segment that we're going to talk about, which is literally the dignity of Saturn in different signs, because this is like a great way to understand how a planet works and expresses itself, like at its best and at its worst, and in certain places where it's just not doing so well, and
Right.
other where it's doing well. And so to get a basic overview, domicile of Saturn is Capricorn, is Aquarius. That is, in global terms, still pretty recent that we have went through that. I mean, I know the last 2 years Saturn has been in Pisces, but before that, at least I know, like when I became more conscious of astrology, Saturn was like just leaving Sagittarius. So for me, that like Saturn through Capricorn and Aquarius years are very much like present, and I could really feel Aquarius, Saturn
Yeah,
there. So that's the domicile of Saturn. And then the exaltation of Saturn is in the sign of Libra, which I think is something that many people, when they hear this for the first time, are kind of shocked.
totally.
And yeah, we're going to talk about this, obviously. Makes perfect sense when you're going to hear us talk about it. And then the detriment of Saturn is going to be the opposite of Capricorn and Aquarius, so Cancer and Leo. And then the fall of Saturn, as we kind of mentioned just before, is Saturn and Aries. And this is what we are not just having natally, but it's going to be a global experience. So everybody is kind of going to get, yeah, the juice and the feeling of Saturn and Aries for the upcoming years. And we kind of already got a bit of that last year, right? Because Saturn briefly dipped into Aries already
Right.
last year. So, yes, should we start off by talking about the domicile of Saturn in Capricorn
Yeah.
and Aquarius?
Yeah, totally. I mean, Saturn is this cold, dry, leaden, wintry planet. And so, Capricorn and Aquarius, these seasons in some parts of the world, in the part of the world that I occupy, that's deep winter. And I just think that there's a natural, it's copacetic that this planet of like patience and like exhaustion and tough tasks and kind of like hunkering down and being disciplined and really like waiting something out rules these 2 seasons that most people are like, I'm cool until Christmas. And then after that, I am like
Yeah.
very depressed and melancholic and just experiencing the deep black bile of winter, which is a very Saturnian experience. Um, yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. It's again, certainly that's the case in the northern hemisphere, and I think it's also one of the reasons why like January, February always feels so long.
Totally.
Like,
Yeah, yeah.
because it's two Saturn consecutive Saturn seasons, so of
Yes.
course it's gonna feel like the fact that February actually has the least amount of days. It always feels like the longest
And
month
yeah,
ever.
exactly. Yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And winter somehow feels like the longest season. And it's funny too. I just think about like, I mean, we'll talk more about like Saturn and medical astrology later, but
Mhm.
in these cold weather seasons, at least, in the northern hemisphere, it's like I have chronic pain and my pain acts up. Saturn rules chronic pain.
Mm.
My joints start creaking. It's just a very Saturnian time. But I also think that Capricorn and Aquarius kind of like respectively exemplify two different types of domiciled Saturn. I hear a lot of people and astrologers talk about how it's funny and interesting that Saturn or is at home and rules both of these signs because they have fairly different aims and expressions. Capricorn being this foundational, very like grounded. They're both world builders, I would say, in a deep sense of the word. But stereotypically, it's like Capricorn has this obsession with creating the structure of the rules and functioning inside of them, and then Aquarius is stereotypically known for seeing the structure and living in the negative space around it.
Yeah, I think well, when we think about Capricorn, we also have to take into consideration that it's like Saturn and Mars that are doing
Yes,
extremely well in Capricorn, which
totally.
is very different than like just Saturn, which is
Yeah, yeah,
Aquarius.
yeah.
And obviously, there's Capricorn is cardinal Earth and Aquarius is fixed air. So even there,
Yes.
we can see the difference. And I feel like, well, for a long time, Saturn was the last visible, I mean, it's still the last visible planet, even though I know sometimes we can see Uranus with the naked eye as well in rare occasions. But
Right.
before the outer planets were even discovered, Saturn was the last planet. And so Saturn didn't just rule what was inside the bounds, it also ruled what was outside of the bounds and what was the mystery. And I think this is like the two-sided coin here where Capricorn often is about the structure and what is inside, and Aquarius kind of tends to be the other, like what is outside and like the questions.
Yeah.
But I do think people underestimate just how like traditionally focused and radical Aquarius also can be. I mean, it's kind of what we're seeing right now with this Aquarius stellium that is happening,
A
to be
hundred
completely
percent.
honest.
Yeah.
And that is so Saturnian. Like that is not Uranus, that is Saturn.
I 100% agree, and I think it's but yeah, I think it's really funny that there is a stereotype of like sure there's like a fun kookiness, rebelliousness, but also like yeah, being a principled radical person also comes from deeply, deeply being familiar with the rules. And that's what Saturn and Aquarius often gives or like can provide for sure.
Yeah, and it's also the I feel like Aquarius often like yes comes with a new idea that by the way oftentimes is taken from a very traditional stance, but it's like
Right.
I'm gonna oppose this
Yeah,
thing that
well,
has
it's
been
like,
going on and
yes,
like let's do this new thing, but it's
yes,
this way, and if you're not you don't have the same thoughts in mind, which is of course air sign territory,
yeah,
like then you're not cool. Like you're not in the group either. Like so
right,
it can do the same thing that Capricorn does, but in a different type of way where it's like,
yeah,
okay, maybe the focus is more on the outsiders, but the outsiders can be extremely radical as well. It's kind of
right,
one of the things that happened with Pluto in Aquarius and like the whole French Revolution and the Age of Enlightenment, where, okay, like they moved away from the like very Capricornian structure of like having clear rules and the oligarchs being on top, and then it was anarchy, and then it was well if you're not part of that anarchy, you're gonna worst case get beheaded as well. So
yeah,
it
totally. It's
was
like
yeah.
exactly, and I think that that also is just an exemplification of Saturn's relationship to boundaries and
Mhm.
relationship to polarity. In it rules the aspect of opposition. And so Saturn is very vacillatory. It's very much, like it is my duty to do this and I have to do it right, or like I will never be able to do this thing, and so I might as well give up. Like it's very one or the other. So it's like you're either in or you're out, etc. It's the boundary between these two very different states of being in general, no matter what those two states are.
Yeah, and I think in Capricorn is because I know a lot of people associate Capricorn with, and it's true, right? It's an earth sign, so it is going to be more materialistic. And this is something that was exemplified a lot, right? It's like if there's a lot of materialism and money involved, you don't have to necessarily speak. There's going to be a clear division, for better or for
Right, a
worse,
boundary. Yeah.
that is happening with Aquarius and like air being present. It's about your ideas and experiences
Yes,
that you can have or you cannot have.
totally.
I think
Yeah,
that's kind of the difference that we can gauge here, and that we have really been seeing over the past 2 years, because that was I think one of the biggest, most clearest shifts that still are happening, but that like transition from very heavily Capricorn focused planets being present and like going through Aquarius. Obviously now there's also going to be like Aries present, so there's going to be different energies, but that's just, I mean, I guess for me at least, it's super noticeable just because I was very much present observing the astrology during that time. So
definitely.
it was very fascinating to me to like see that and gauge that. So yeah, and even when like Saturn and both Jupiter were in Aquarius. By the way, also the time that I studied ancient Hellenistic astrology, like makes sense that I would go back
Totally.
to the roots.
Yes, yeah. Saturn being old things and ancientness and
Exactly, yeah.
antiquity. Yeah, it's perfect.
So it's really, I just want people to realize just how Saturnian Aquarius is, and that a lot of the associations they have with Aquarius being ruled by Uranus actually come from Saturn. And I
Yeah,
think, and it makes me sad because I feel like it dims down Saturn a lot. Like people don't realize just how radical Saturn actually is and can be, because we put a lot of these things just on Uranus right now. And Uranus has its place. I just don't think it like is Aquarian in its essence or anything like that. So,
yeah. No, I totally agree. I also think that Saturn, I mean, the way that Saturn has shown up in my life, I think Saturn can offer us also a very non-conventional view of what is beautiful or what is
mhm.
interesting, and that is a very like Aquarian thing as well, much more so than it's a Uranian thing. So I think that that is something that we underestimate about Saturn too.
Oh yeah, that sounds like, talking about Saturn and beautiful things. Maybe we can talk a bit more about Saturn and Libra and
Yeah,
the exaltation of Saturn there, because again, I think it's something that people hear that and it seems like, why would Saturn has its exaltation in Libra? I don't think it's something
totally.
that people would associate with Libra at first, but I think once you like get more deeply into it, it actually starts making a lot of sense. So, do you wanna take the lead on
Yeah,
that one, and
yeah, yeah,
I'll
yeah.
follow up?
Well, I was thinking, when I was making notes about this and thinking about Saturn and Libra, I was thinking about the kind of like secret affinity between I'm very Saturn Venus, and Saturn and Venus kind of has this like secret relationship where they're like unlikely allies. I mean, they're both cold, and so it's like, great, we're both cold, maybe we get along in that way, but um I wrote down um, this Saturn Venus quote, or this quote by C.S. Lewis that I found was very Saturn Venus. It's from A Grief Observed, which is one of my favorite texts. All human relationships end in pain. And this is me bringing my Saturn into the mix. But like, there is a relationship between Saturn and Venus the way that there is a relationship between love and grief, because Venus is love and Saturn is grief. And so, of course, if you love something enough, you will grieve it. And that is how I view the relationship between Saturn and Venus. And I think Libra being this Venusian devotion, appreciation of beauty, but also appreciation of justice. I think they both are justice minded, and Libra is just as interested in upholding justice and rules as Saturn is. So I think it makes all the sense in the world that not only Saturn and Venus have this kind of like copacetic relationship, but that Saturn is happy in Libra. Um, yeah, and you have something you jotted down for that as well, which I really, really loved and thought was extremely beautiful.
I have a quote as well. But I do want to preface this by saying that I found this quote when I was at an exhibition in like the Zurich Kunsthaus. I don't know, just like the art gallery. And it was an exhibition titled Time. So it was everything about time.
Perfect.
couldn't be more Saturnian. And
I
I
wish I
went.
had been there.
It was one of my favorite exhibitions, and it was in the beginning of 2022 or 2023. I don't know. It doesn't matter so much, but the fact is, I was just going there during Capricorn season, and it was the Capricorn
Yeah,
new moon, so it couldn't be more fitting the day that
totally.
I went there. And so naturally, there were a lot of things that have to do with time there. And there's also this beautiful depiction by Albrecht Dürer, Melancholia, a picture that a lot of people know. And I think that is such a great image for Saturn to like
Yeah.
just capture Saturn. And we're going to talk a bit more about Saturn and Melancholia later on because it's worth exploring that on a deeper level. And I found this quote there, which was by Norbert Elias, and he wrote this book, even though it's titled Time and Essay, but it's like a book as far as I understood it. Although I have never like bought the actual book and read it through, but he said that it is the peculiarity of the concept of time, not only that it is a symbol of an extremely extensive synthesis, but also a symbol of relationships. Uh, that for me just brings back the point to the fact that, yeah, there's like relationships like can be measured by time and all of
And
that,
vice versa.
and vice
Yeah.
versa. Exactly. And I
I,
think that's why Saturn does so well in Libra. It makes a lot of
yes.
sense.
I was thinking about Saturn and Aries celebrities, and I was like looking at Saturn and Aries celebrity charts, and Pamela Anderson has Saturn and Aries natally, and she was someone that I really think of as exemplifying that. And I started listening to her reading her memoir as research. I was like, this can be research for this podcast, but she says that like she measures time through relationships. And I was just thinking of that as like a very Saturnian concept, like you're saying, of like, I think I tend to do the same thing, and my concept of time itself is really measured by who I was with and who I shared that time with, and who was around me and present in my life. So I think that's such a beautiful, um, yeah, a beautiful wrapping up of that concept.
Yes. Yes. And I also well, I don't know if I should pull it up now, but there's a because I don't know if I'll find the quote immediately right now, but there's a book called Aphrodite's Justice by James Hillman. Love James Hillman.
Love them. Shouts out.
And he writes there a bit about this concept. And by the way, I also got this from my one of my main astro teachers, Adam Ellenboss. The cosmos shares the same stem from the word cosmetic, which means
Mm,
everything is in its perfect order. Everything has its divine order.
yeah.
That's what makes it beautiful. And I think that's, like the beauty of like Saturn and Venus together is the fact that there's this divine order up in the cosmos, that everything happens in its own time. Like there's an intelligence about that. And even though it might seem chaotic for us down here, there is a wisdom somewhere in all of that. And that is what
Yes.
makes it beautiful. And that was also one of the main concerns, I think, in more ancient times when once people were like kind of moving away from paganism and a lot of like religion got into the mix. People
Yeah.
were questioning like, is it good that instead of everything is divine and has its place, we're focused on one thing is divine and it's up there and it's like ruling over
Right.
us.
Separate. Yeah. Totally.
Exactly. And I think that's the beauty, I think, of Saturn and Libra is like bringing us back to this concept that everything is divine and everything has its place
Absolutely.
exactly when it needs to show up and come up and happen. So of
Absolutely.
course. And there's also, again, I think there is divine justice. I really think that. And it makes sense for me also in courtrooms that Saturn would be extremely present there,
Right.
which is something that we associate with Libra a lot, this image with like this woman and the scales. So,
Yeah. I have a very Saturnian, Saturn and Libra friend who is in school to be a paralegal. And she's also an astrologer, so she really knows the hilarity and significance of that natal promise showing up. But I'm like, there could be nothing more perfect. And also Saturn and Libra, that is perfection and like a yearning toward the beauty of perfection or perfection of beauty.
Agreed. Yes. Yes. Is there anything else that I want to say? Is there anything else you want to add to all of that?
I don't think so. I'm sure something will ping me later that I
Oh,
left out.
definitely. Well, then let's talk about the not so not so fun
Sure.
expressions of Saturn, which
It's
is going to
important
be
too.
Saturn in detriment. So in the sign of Cancer and of Leo.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Saturn does not enjoy the luminaries. Saturn is deep and dark and swallows everything and is largely lightless and, let in. And obviously, the golden sun and the silver moon shining their light, that light just gets swallowed up by Saturn. And so it makes all the sense in the world that Saturn is not happy in these, luminescent, shining places. Um, yeah. Also, with Saturn in Cancer, I was just thinking about Saturn and the moon's relationship and how interesting it is. Um, and how, Saturn's way is often to discipline, whereas the moon's way is often to nurture. And those two things can be difficult to reconcile. I have a Capricorn moon. I know all about that. Or, like logistical analysis versus depth of feeling. And I don't think those two things are inherently at odds with each other at all. But I think that, again, it can be really difficult to reconcile them. And oftentimes Saturn kind of wins out in terms of doling out the punishment as opposed to the moon, delivering comfort. So I think it makes all the sense in the world that Saturn is a little edgy or uncomfortable in Cancer. Um, yeah, and do you have anything to add?
Yeah, yeah, I certainly think the relationship between Saturn and the moon is a very interesting one because the moon takes like what, 27 and a half days to like come back and it's
Oh, totally. She's
basically
moving quick.
exactly, and it's
Yeah.
and Saturn, and that's like kind of when also Saturn return
Yep.
starts. So
Yes.
there is like this interesting affinity again with time between both of them. Again, obviously the moon being a lot quicker,
Yeah.
but them like kind of finding some sort of common ground there.
Right.
But I agree. I mean, and currently we have Jupiter in Cancer, and for me, Cancer is just so much the sign of like fertility and growth, and that's just not Saturn's territory at all.
Right.
Saturn constricts and limits. It
Saturn
does the opposite.
harvests.
Yeah, it does the
Yes.
opposite.
Yeah.
So it, of course, Saturn just wouldn't vibe there so much. And I think I brought this metaphor up a few times during the series where I think it's useful to look at the signs as like hotels where the planets can check in.
Right.
And just imagine Saturn checking in the Cancer hotel that is like water and growth. And it's Saturn would just be like, what the fuck? Like,
Totally.
what I can't do the thing that I aim to do there. When
Yeah, it's a
Saturn
little
checks into
too
the, yeah.
humid in here
Yeah.
for Saturn, for sure. And I was thinking about Saturn having significations of seafaring. I think it's balance. I know that Chris Brennan brings that through in his book on Hellenistic astrology. But the moon also having associations with obviously ruling the tides and the ocean. And I think it's an interesting distinction to make that Saturn rules seafaring as opposed to the sea itself. And so again, it's like this container versus this vastness, and Saturn loves and wants limits and containment. And the moon is just, the vastness of the abyss.
Mm.
And I think there's that like contradiction exemplified pretty beautifully between the difference between, sitting in a boat and floating in salt water. But there's also that affinity exemplified by how the ocean is as dark, the depths of the ocean are as dark as it gets on Earth as well. So there's something that the moon and Saturn can agree on, though they can't agree on everything. But yeah, there's a little bit of a strange push and pull between those two planets.
Yeah, I think it's also a bit in the story of like the opposition of just Capricorn and Cancer.
Yeah,
I mean, Cancer like I don't know if that's true evolutionary astrology, but I think it is also present in ancient times because I'm going to take the sea goat archetype here, which we should totally bring that back.
Absolutely.
But the
Yeah.
fact that both of them rule over over the solstices. So
Yes.
one's over the winter and one's over the summer solstice. And technically Cancer is, it's an animal that is on the land, but then it can swim down, go to the abyss. And that is kind of like where that sea goat creature is born that then goes
Yeah.
up to land again and can kind of like throw, I don't know, just like get away with its fins and then it can go and climb the mountain. And it's like this like up and down kind of notion thing. I think for that the Cancer Capricorn axis is extremely interesting. Um, that's what I have to say about this. I don't know if you want to add something to this. Otherwise, I want to talk a bit more about Saturn and Leo, which is a bit different. But feel free to
Yeah.
add something if you
No,
want.
I love that. I mean, I could talk about the moon and Saturn and the abyss of the ocean all day, so I'll cut myself off. Oh, well, I also just think, yeah, life and death being the boundaries of each other. That's very Cancerian and
Oh
Capricornian or
yeah.
Saturnian and lunar, like
Hmm.
the moon is birth, Saturn is death. That's all that needs to be said by
Yeah,
me for that.
certainly. Yes. And then Saturn in Leo is Saturn and Leo, I think there's a similar thing that is going on, which is also going on in the fall of Saturn, which is in Aries.
Totally.
Obviously, they're not the same sign. I don't want to group Aries and Leo as being the same, but I have to say something about Saturn and Aries for that to make sense. And so
Understood.
Saturn and Aries, one of the reasons, again, I'm coming back to the natural forces and obviously the Northern Hemisphere. One of the reasons Saturn doesn't do well in the sign of Aries is because Aries rules over the spring equinox, and this is when light officially takes over the darkness. And so, of course, the sun would be exalted in the sign of Aries
Right.
because it's super present. Saturn doesn't do well there. But where's the opposite, the exaltation of Saturn? Well, it's in Libra. It's because Libra is the autumn equinox and it's when the darkness takes over. Also, one
Yeah.
of the reasons. And so, if Aries is the exaltation of the sun, naturally, the domicile of the sun, which is Leo,
Yeah.
Saturn is also not really going to be hooray up there. And
Totally.
I think also the fact that it just, the sun is like the center of our solar system. I mean, technically it's like overpowering because it's the
Right.
center and we wouldn't even really have the other planets the way they are if it weren't for the sun. But I think it's just like way too much for Saturn. Like that force of like lightness and like authenticity and boom and presence is like it's just a bit too much for Saturn. And Saturn like would constrict that and that just kind of just doesn't work. I mean, try constraining the sun. Like it's not really possible.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no boundaries that could be placed on that. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if I have much to add. I think that's it. Also, I just think about Saturn being so foundational and kind of like blending into everything and being the structure of everything. And the sun, sometimes can be thought of as this kind of like the light of individuality or like egoic ego consciousness, and Saturn kind of like craves belonging to all in a strange way.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think of Saturn as very individualistic. Um,
Agreed.
but
Agreed.
yeah, I mean, the sun can also be birth too, so that's birth and death. Again, as you can tell, I'm a one-trick pony. That's what I love to talk about.
No, but I agree. I agree. Definitely the sun is life force
Yes,
and
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Saturn is not
Vitality,
that.
100%. Yes.
So it's yeah, and I think there's also, and I want to be completely honest here, I think both of us, we know a lot of people that have Saturn. I would say like Saturn, Sagittarius till up with like Saturn and Gemini. I don't
Yeah.
really know a lot of people that have Saturn in the other signs, which sometimes, and because we were both like when Saturn was in like Cancer and Leo, I don't know what, like not even 10 years old. Like it's
Yeah.
hard for me to fully grasp it. And I want to be like honest in here that I think I'll have a deeper understanding once these transits happen again and when I'm older to go through them. Because right now it's more intellectual that I'm like trying to go on about this, and it's gonna. I'm looking forward to experience that once it happens, but there's still a few years in
I
advance.
couldn't agree more, and I think that's a very appropriately Saturnian admission.
Yeah. Mm. So let's talk about our last last Saturn dignity, which is Saturn and Aries. And I think there's a lot to say here, not just because of our own experiences, but I think also because it is kind of happening very soon,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it's going to be present for all of us.
definitely. I think at the time of recording, we can definitely all feel it coming as well. It's like the transit of the moment that everyone's talking about.
Yeah, and it's gonna right. I'm planning to release this on February 14th,
To
Saturn's
celebrate.
ingress. So it is a
Yes.
celebration this episode as well.
Yeah, I mean, Cardinal Fire and Saturn. What is Saturn going to do with Cardinal Fire? Cardinal Fire is the opposite of Saturn's nature. Saturn loves longevity. Saturn loves stamina to sustain, and this sign of the kind of erratic, beautiful, lustful, frantic birth of spring that is Aries. And that kind of like just go for it, just do it nature of Aries. Obviously, Saturn takes issue with that, and Saturn often teaches hard lessons about sustaining and seeing something through and perfection when Saturn is in Aries. Um, yeah, it's also, I wrote down it's in equal measure the possibility of starting something and kind of immediately being really good at it, or starting something and expecting to be really good at it, and then when you're not, you just give up. And so Saturn really does teach how to sustain a practice so that you are not disillusioned immediately by not being able to do something right away. Um, and I think we see a lot. We're already seeing a lot of that come up in astrology and in, world circumstances. And I think in terms of burnout and like political burnout and people having conversations about how to sustain a radical movement, that really smacks of Saturn and Aries as well.
Agreed. Yeah, I think there's inherently like a very nervous energy that Saturn and Aries has.
Absolutely.
Because it's like it's a naturally very stressed placement because Aries is about beginning and doing something and being in the
Yeah.
moment, and Saturn is not about being in the moment
Yeah.
specifically. Like Saturn is more about like pondering about time and about death and things that will happen.
Right.
And so naturally like Saturn and Aries is like kind of like on edge because it's like I cannot accept that I need time for this to happen. Like it needs to
Yeah.
happen
Or
right now.
patience.
Or
Yes.
patience. That is a big
Yeah.
word. That is when I had the closing Saturn square. That is a word that was constantly coming to haunt me day in
Yep.
and day out. Makes sense that the closing Saturn square right between Saturn and Capricorn, which is Saturn and Domicile to Saturn and Aries, would teach patience to that Saturn and Aries.
Yes.
So I think just this energy, and there is like again, it's that sun energy that just feels like very constrained. It's like it can't like fully shine clearly, and there is a lot of I associate a lot of like burnout with that. It's like fire that can't like flame up. It's like trying
Yeah,
to start the car engine and it just like kind of won't fully go. But
totally.
then the other extreme is like once it goes, it's like bam, full speed ahead, and it's the other
Exactly.
extreme. And so Saturn in Aries is just a bit like extreme in that way, where it's
Yeah,
very hard to find the middle ground between certain things. And I feel like, at least in my experience, I often needed to go both of the extreme routes to be able to actually find the middle ground. Like, how can you otherwise even find the middle ground if you don't know both of the extreme sides?
definitely. Yeah, I mean, again, also a very Saturnian concept of like, all right, let's look at the full scope of this and then try to meet somewhere in well, I get yeah, that's Jupiterian as well, I think. But you know, yeah, I was reflecting on some writings that I had put out on Saturn and Aries, and at one point when it first made its ingress over the spring, I likened it to somebody being like, "Hey, can you like, do you want to go on a cross-country road trip? You have to drive, and it's a stick shift, and you don't know how to do it." And you being like, "Yes, I'll just learn through doing it." And so I think that that is, where there is weakness there and challenge there, there's also simultaneously that sense and knowledge of like, I think the inverse is happening with people experiencing their Saturn square with Saturn coming into Aries now, where it's like, we cannot plan for everything or everything that's going to happen. And so sometimes we just have to trial and error it. And sometimes we can't have control. And that, the acceptance that comes with Saturn making any natal transit or important transit in your chart is, I think, especially, um, exemplified by Saturn and Aries, because sometimes you just have to accept the limitations of your own energy or
Yeah,
that there's not enough oxygen to keep the fire going. It's learning that the hard way. Um, you know,
agreed. I also wrote an article that was never published, but whatever. But the title of that
how
of
Saturn and
that
Aries of you.
the title of that was Saturn and Aries slowness is not your enemy. Uh,
We need
and
it. Publish it
yeah,
now.
yeah, I do intend to do that sometime, but it was the whole like point of that was basically to kind of make people realize that it's again, I'm going back to like this very nervous energy that Saturn and Aries has,
Yeah.
and that oftentimes it fears that slowing down is like very dangerous.
Yes.
And
100%.
I think that's a lot of what, yeah, like the maturity of Saturn and Aries. It's definitely what I'm hoping to learn from my Saturn return, and maybe you as well. Like, I hope that I can learn how to handle this in a more mature way where slowing down doesn't constantly always feel like so threatening or like things are going to fall apart if I'm not like holding them. Because Aries is also about the self very much. And I think there's this dichotomy where Saturn and Aries can be either like not taking any responsibility at all or taking like way too much responsibility for things like that. Like you don't even like, why would you take responsibility for that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that speaks to the Saturn-Neptune conjunction that we're moving into
Oh yeah.
as well. Like there is a huge, I mean, Saturn is boundaries and Neptune is dissolution thereof, as well as disillusionment. And, paired with the melancholy of Saturn, there is this propensity for, kind of like wildly shifting between that sense of individual responsibility, which is very real because you have to take care of yourself and you have to make sure that you are on lock and that, your shit's all together if you are going to contribute to a larger movement, but also you will not save everyone and everything. And so I think I feel the Saturn and Neptune of it all reflected in what you just said as well.
Yeah, it's certainly I think it's yeah, it fascinates me the fact that we are getting this transit together right now, and
Yeah,
and I do think that Neptune is softening Saturn or cushioning Saturn, I think is a good word
yeah,
to use here. And I do think that also Saturn is very useful for Neptune in the way that it can ground Neptune a bit more than usually.
absolutely.
So yeah, very fascinating that basically it's both of them together, and certainly
Yeah,
the whole stay of Saturn in Aries is going to be with Neptune, even if they're going to be separated and not in engagement range, but they're going to be co-present, which I don't think we should underestimate. So it's going to be a different type of Saturn in Aries, I feel like this time around. I don't know how it was when I mean, yeah, Neptune was, well, I guess in Capricorn and Aquarius
yeah.
during that time. So it was very different last time around.
Definitely different. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. Do you have anything more to say about Saturn and Aries?
I know it'll come up again.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It'll come up again. I mean, I just think in general also, um, Aries being youth, or these like, the conception of Aries representing youth and Saturn representing
Mm,
aging. I also think a huge challenge, and we can talk about this just in terms of like building a relationship with Saturn and remediation, but a huge challenge of Saturn in Aries is coming to terms or grips with aging. Like I was thinking about Betty Davis, who I love, her birth chart, and her really, important. She has a big, big Saturn and Aries signature, and she won an Oscar right out of the gate doing her second movie, and then her career petered out, and she came back into prominence for playing these roles of women who were clinging to their youth in
mm,
vain, and then really became this icon with like Whatever Happened to Baby Jane and All About Eve, where essentially she plays someone who is washed up or getting there, and having to come to grips with that. And like I said about Pamela Anderson, I was thinking about her as well, how she used to, she wasn't taken seriously earlier on in her career because everyone just saw her as this like the hottest woman on earth,
mm,
and nobody will
mhm.
take the hottest woman on earth seriously, unfortunately. But now she's being seen, after her second Saturn return as someone who is embracing aging and not wearing makeup and aging really
Yeah.
gracefully. And so I think that after the second Saturn return, should you be lucky enough to get there, God willing, like there is this opportunity to really remediate Saturn and Aries by truly embracing aging and what that means for you. It's just a theme that I see with Saturn always, but especially with Saturn and Aries, there's this specific, distinct, you know, difficult relationship between youth and old
Mm,
age.
yeah, that's a good point. I was to like bring a real life example. During summer, Saturn was still in Aries. Uh, like it was just before Saturn moved back into Aries, and then I was in summer holiday in Croatia, and reading that book, which we're totally also going to talk about Saturn
Yes,
transit. It's right here because I was like, perfect time to read this book.
exactly.
And it happened to be that I was there and I just kind of went alone, but to circumstance that it happened that this basically the daughter of the friend of my mom, and she's exactly 10 years younger than me. She also came with her friends. And I was like there like first before them, and they came a few
Right.
days later. And I was like shook by that young youthful energy, like so like
Yeah,
boundaryless and so like talking about all sorts of things where I was like, I don't think I need to like hear or know that. And then I was
totally.
thinking like, but I feel like I was also that unhinged when I was that age.
Oh, 100%. Yes.
But it
Yeah,
really brought me to this like it triggered something in me, the fact that like I'm not past my Saturn return, but I'm also not as young as I used to be. And there was
totally.
somehow like sadness within that realization that that is gone. Like I don't that youth that, just turning 18 or being 17 is like that is not my life anymore. And I won't be
Yeah.
there anymore. And I'm stepping into this new chapter. And I think it is yeah, like that. Like saying goodbye to being young and youth. I mean, by all means, I don't think you're old in your 30s.
Right. Of
But
course. But it's a
but it's
phase of
yeah.
accepting aging. I feel like, I mean, with Saturn transits in general, the Saturn return especially is just a juncture at which you kind of look down the barrel of, look backwards down the barrel of your youth and being like, oh, I'm not 21 anymore. I felt like I was still 21 up until this point, and suddenly I am not. It just happens so fast. Yeah, I totally agree. And also I'm coming to terms with like as someone who has a who has a very prominent Saturn in Aries, I was historically always the youngest person in a space. And everybody was
Mm,
always
mhm.
that person who was, everyone was 10 years older than me. And now I am 10 years older than everyone else. And I'm like, oh my God, what is going on? So it's
Yeah.
gonna sound foolish to somebody who is much older if they're listening to this, but really the Saturn transits kind of give you that view of your place time. And also like the nostalgia aspect of Saturn is
I
very
think so, yeah.
real as well. As harsh as it is, there's a romance, and a kind of longing and grief to thinking about your youth.
I agree. All of a sudden you're that person. You're like, when I was your age, I also
Right,
thought that. And then I grew more mature and I
right.
didn't think that anymore.
Yes, and you're like, whoa, sorry, sorry.
Becoming an old grumpy man is Saturn return lore, but uh,
Absolutely
but it's okay. But I certainly saw myself this summer, and it was okay. Like I got along with them and everything.
amazing.
Like it wasn't about that, but it was a bit a lot in the beginning for sure. uh,
Yeah.
but I definitely came into that role where like I see myself or I saw myself and like I'm not there anymore, and there's a lot of opinions that or thoughts that I had and I thought I knew life and everything, and it completely changed, especially when I had my closing Saturn square.
Well,
Um,
totally. Yeah.
was yeah, and there's some decisions which I'm like, oh yeah, I wished when I was that age I maybe wouldn't have done that or things like that. So, anyways, there's a lot to
I
say.
have
We're
that in
gonna
droves.
yeah,
Yes.
we're gonna talk extensively about Saturn return in a few segments down the road. I think we can talk a bit. I mean, I don't know if there's so much to say about this specifically, but the next segment here is kind of a bit about just the fact that Saturn belongs to the day sect and that it's diurnal. I think that is mostly important for people to hear that have day charts, because
Yes.
if you have a day chart, and that means you're born during the day, if there's any confusion around that, that means that you're the sect, like you're at the day sect, and that means Jupiter is your greater benefic and Saturn is your lesser malefic. And that usually means that while Saturn transits can be hard, they are usually more doable. And Mars transit tend to be harsher. And the
Yeah.
opposite is if you have a night chart, then Saturn is your out of sect malefic. And a lot of times, people that have night charts tend to experience Saturn returns and other Saturn transits like on a lot harsher level than people that have day charts. I think that's important to say. Is there anything you want to add to that or?
Yeah. I mean, I have Saturn by night, so I think about this a lot. And I think about it in Saturn return readings with clients as well. The way that I like to say it is that I don't know if it's I hesitate to assign a value judgment like of good and bad or like easier and harder just because I don't want to scare people like and I don't want to scare myself. But what I often say is that like Saturn in a day chart it the hindsight might come sooner. Like the hindsight of a Saturn return, or like the payoff, or you feeling like you understand or see what it all was for, or like that integration of Saturn's lessons might come sooner. And I am going to use the word easy, like it might be a little bit easier getting there just in terms of the path, whereas Saturn by night, it might take a little bit longer to actually get an accurate view of what Saturn was bringing to you in your Saturn return, or it might be more of a struggle to internalize or integrate those lessons. It might require a greater discipline, but that doesn't mean it's not going to happen. I always think about Diana Rose Harper calling having a day chart Saturn privilege, and that is like really so true. A lot of times it's easier to just look in the rear view when you have a Saturn by day and be like, oh, totally, I can account for all of this. But that, it doesn't mean like Saturn rules both the things that change us for the better, that are challenging in our lives, and the things that seem to happen for no reason and we can't make meaning of. And I think that that's okay as well. Like, as someone who works with death and grief and dying, that's something that I really had to come to terms with. It's like sometimes things just happen and it's terrible, and we don't have to make sense of that right away. And so the challenge of having Saturn by night is sitting with that and not having to make sense of it right away, at least is what I find.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Uh, I have a day chart, so but I
I'm very
can.
jealous.
I mean, it's still a fallen Saturn, but I
Yeah.
will say that Mars transits. historically did definitely feel harsher for me. Like
Sure.
that is just very much true. So at the end of the day, they're both malefics planets, and malefic planets
Absolutely.
usually just bring in challenging experiences. And this is actually this is kind of what we're also going to talk about in the next segment. We can kind of like go into that just as like the concept of Saturn and a malefic planet,
Yeah.
because that word, it's a loaded word to just like put on a planet. But I think we just need planets, and that are Saturn and Mars, that talk about experiences that are, for the most part, unpleasant in our life. And
Yeah.
and I really I like to say pleasant and unpleasant a lot more than positive or negative, because in the long run, who the fuck knows what is positive and negative?
Totally. We can't, and the whole point, I mean, oftentimes the Saturn transit will prove that we cannot tell. Something that
Yeah,
might feel really
true,
challenging
true.
in the moment, might bring about something that is more pleasant or surprising or gives us more depth or a wider lens on something. So I think that's a good phrasing. Pleasant and unpleasant is much more delicate than positive and negative.
Yeah, so wait, I think you wrote a few things here with Saturn as a malefic planet. I don't know if
Oh,
you want to uh, riff
I
off
did.
of that. You want to?
Yeah. Well, I think about, I mean, I wrote more again about just like what Saturn does in the chart and in transits. And I had written something before that's on my Instagram. I have a lot of kind of like bite-sized Saturn thoughts on there. But astronomically, Saturn's rings are objects that um, flew, like entered Saturn's orbit too closely, so the immense gravity of the planet flattened them and changed their shape. And when I found that out, I thought that it was a very beautiful metaphor for what Saturn does in our life, and obviously something that completely changes our reality, which Saturn often does, or our perception of reality, or how we respond to reality. This is all what Saturn is for and what Saturn is used to doing. Obviously, that's not always going to be considered a good thing. Change is really hard historically, especially living in America where we have like a death denial complex and we want everything to remain the same, even if that same is horrible and has been the whole time. Like change is really feared. And so what Saturn often does is bring circumstances into your life that have such gravity to them, or you feel so immensely pulled toward just by the whims of fate that it just completely restructures you, just like the rings of Saturn. Um, yeah, and of course, I was reading the beginning of Wisdom, which is a translation of Ibn Ezra, and Saturn indicates destruction, ruin, death, grief, mourning, ancient things, the elderly, crying, wandering, tilling the land, exhausting work, cemeteries and caves, and undertakers, malefic things,
Yeah.
all in all. Like this is not a fun or pleasant list for most of us. For some of us, we love this kind of stuff. But, I just think that the way that I choose to look at Saturn is death and grief and hard circumstances, like you're saying, are just as present in our life and just as important to be with and sit with and examine as, the romance of Venus or the beauty of Venus or the gifts of
Mm.
Jupiter, or the light of the sun or, the comfort of the moon. We can't erase malefic circumstances from our lives. And Saturn also rules over fear or is associated with fear. And so a lot of what interacting with or interfacing with Saturn, especially during big Saturn transits, asks you to do is look your fears right in the face. And we can't do that if we pretend that they don't exist at all. So those are a lot of my nutshell thoughts on Saturn as a malefic planet and how important malefic
Yeah.
planets are to our practice as astrologers. But I also want to balance the doom and gloom of medieval and ancient astrology with the kind of like spiritual bypassing that can happen.
Mm.
I really try to find a balance and, figure out what malefic can look like in a helpful way as opposed to just being scary.
Agreed, yeah. I feel like that statement you made before is so Saturn and Aries.
Yeah, absolutely. It's jumping out for sure.
I certainly think it's something that's going to be present for a lot of people and
Yeah,
globally in the coming years. And yeah, I think it's again, I think it's just we would spiritually bypass things if we wouldn't have a planet that talks about difficult things in life. Because there needs
totally.
to be room and space for that as well, and that's Saturn. And yeah, again, these experiences, for the most part, I wouldn't say are the most pleasant experiences that we have in life. But isn't it beautiful that we have a planet that like we can talk to about that? Like, imagine if we
Yeah,
didn't, like that would suck way more.
totally. And I think that these are all experiences that can surprise us with their beauty or gravity. Like I think thinking about death and talking about death gives life so much meaning, not in a morbid way, but just like thinking about our struggles and how they bind us together as human beings and connect us is like, mwah, that's just the spice of life for me, which is why I'm like, I love Saturn.
Yes, there's, I think the like aesthetic contemplative nature of Saturn, which has a
Yes.
lot to do pondering about death and all of that. Actually, and that's like the wisdom for most of these people that practice in these religions and traditions is the fact that if you do every day, like consider the fact that you could die anytime, it actually makes you appreciate living much more. And arguably, because of that, you can live much more fully while you are living instead of
Yeah.
just pretending that these things like don't really exist. And then once it happens, it like your world kind of is cracking down or something. And again, with that, I'm not trying to say that oh, I'm looking forward to the day that somebody in my family passes away. Like, no, but because I know that's a reality that will happen, I can appreciate the moments where I'm alive and they're alive and the people I love are alive a lot more because I can be a lot more present because I know that moment will come eventually. And I
Yeah.
do think that's yeah, that's the importance of Saturn in our lives.
Huge.
And globally, I think that we need Saturn a lot more than we admit, I think.
Yeah. Well, I was also just sorry, I feel like off topic, but I was thinking about Saturn, Neptune as well, and how I feel like maybe I'm skewed toward a bias, but like I do think that this could be the second coming of um I'm seeing people being like prepare your will or like get
Hmm?
your
Yeah.
affairs in order. And I think that a positive opportunity that can come from a challenging signature like and new, never before seen in our lifetime signature is the reemergence of a consciousness that is mindful of death and like death awareness. And, we saw the big resurgence of the term death doula and death midwifing and end of life care as something that kind of like became more popularized around like 2016. And now I think we're experiencing the second, moment of people being like, oh, I should really figure out what that is all about if we are going to move into this next moment. And we can ask Saturn if you want to know more.
I agree. There's uh do you know Michael Singer by
No,
any
I
chance?
don't.
He's not an astrologer, but he wrote one of his most famous books is what is the name again? Like the Untamed Life. No, I'm butchering this right now, but it's what is the name of this book? I need to Google this right
You got
now.
to look
But
it up because I
but
want to
he
know.
he talks my point is not specifically that book, but it's about like he talks a lot about surrender.
Mm.
Wait, Michael
Huge,
Singer.
huge word of Saturn that I think about a lot.
Agree. Oh,
Surrender.
okay. The Untethered Soul. So
Oh,
way
yes, yes,
off,
yes.
way off.
I used to work at a bookstore and I was like, I know this name. I haven't read the book. But yeah.
It's okay. It's I enjoyed his other book, like Living from a Place of Surrender, way more, to be completely
Mm.
honest, because it's like very in real life and practical, and it's kind of like his autobiography almost.
Interesting.
But what was the point that I wanted to make with all of this? Well, oh yeah, he was talking about the fact that like the final surrender that we are doing is dying, and
Yeah.
and all these practices of like meditation and being present and like pondering is to lead up to when you are dying and you're doing that final surrendering moment, that you can be present in that moment too. Because guess what? This is a literal once in a lifetime experience you're getting.
Totally.
And I know personally, I want to be as present as I can
I
in
would
that
love,
moment.
yes. What a
So,
privilege it would be
yeah.
to be present in that moment is what I always think. Yeah, absolutely. Which is funny because, we were talking about how like Saturn oftentimes is not presence and is stuff in the long term. But I do think that there is an aspect of Saturn that is, you know, time includes right now.
Mhm.
So I do think that there is like a presence that comes through deep feeling of the body or deep attention and mindfulness to immediate circumstance that Saturn, maybe Saturn and Aries specifically, but Saturn, I think, also can help us work through or work on. I do think that's an aspect of it. Ask me more about that later because I haven't worked that out now. It's a working theory, but I think there's something there.
I think so too. I think Saturn is just a lot about like reality,
Yes.
and
Yeah,
that's as
exactly.
real as reality
Right
can
now
get.
is as real as we get. Yeah, for sure.
So there's yeah, and I mean, what can I say about death? I haven't died yet, but physically at
Totally.
least. But there's, as far as I know from a lot of people that have had near-death experiences, there's there's a lot that goes on in that moment, and time also feels different during that time. So
100%. Yeah.
it's definitely an extremely Saturnian process in and of itself. And then we're back to the Capricorn Cancer axis of like death and rebirth again
Yes.
here. So yes. Let me see. Is there okay, I don't know if that will make so much sense to go to that segment right now, but but I did also want to talk about the glyph of Saturn.
Yeah.
Which is well, we can't see it here right now. I don't know if I can pull up a picture on my phone to just like show it to the camera if people don't know it, but it kind of looks
Well,
like a
it looks
oh, I
like
mean, okay,
that.
yeah, actually that is so much. Yeah. It looks like kind of like a five actually oftentimes also.
Yeah.
Um but it has that
A
like
little scythe.
psych, is that
Scythe.
I always say skith. Oh my
I say it
God.
wrong too, but I think it's scythe. But
Okay,
yeah.
okay. That thing with the
The
circle.
sickle. Yeah, it's a
Oh,
sickle.
the sickle. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, the fact that this is like basically in the glyph of Saturn, and again, Saturn exalting in the sign of Libra. And I know that like Virgo season is a lot about harvest, but Libra season comes right after Virgo season. Certainly, the
That's
harvesting process is still ongoing there.
yeah.
Yep. There is a lot, just a whole like agricultural process and like the fact that it's like Earth in itself, I think is also very Saturnian. And so agriculture being linked to the land and to again also like giving us the things we need, which I think kind of also has to do with Saturn, even though it's not maybe like the first association. But
Totally.
all of that is, and like the hard work and labor that goes into this whole process of agriculture certainly is Saturnian, but also like the patience you need for to have an actual aces of a garden. Like that just doesn't happen in the first year.
A
It
hundred percent.
takes a while
Yeah.
to get there.
Yeah, and I think we can even bring that back to Saturn and Venus having this kind of like secret love affair with
Yeah.
each other, Saturn and Libra, where it's like beautiful things take time, and having an incredible crop yield, whether it's sustenance or flowers or whatever type of sustenance, like Saturn rules gardening and farming and tilling the land, and Venus also has a huge relationship to flowers and beauty and the yield that comes from all the beautiful things that come from the land. Um, yeah, and just in general, like if you want to attune yourself to Saturn, attune yourself to the cycles of the seasons and to the cycles of time, I feel like that's a really slept on aspect of Saturn and a really slept on thing because a way that we can measure time is by looking outside our window and figuring out, okay, what season is it? What's going
Mhm.
on? How are the plants responding to the weather and the light? That's so Saturnian. And, they're fairly reliable given climate collapse, but it's just everything always happens in the same circle, and death always comes again and again with the scythe swinging, and that is such a Saturnian experience.
Certainly Saturn and Libra.
Yeah,
There's one of my weird little hobbies. I don't know if it's even a hobby, but I love taking pictures of houses that are being built or buildings that are being built. And like every time I walk past, they're just like taking a picture. And then I have this folder where like I can see the process of it being like built further
amazing.
on.
Yes.
So Saturnian. Um, yeah. And there's also, I think, yeah, I think that was in 2020. Uh, and that was like when Saturn was going back and forth between Capricorn and Aquarius. And
Mm.
that's when I took a picture of the same tree every month for the exact same reasons.
I love that. I think everyone should adopt
Oh,
that
yeah.
same little hobby. I think it's not a weird hobby at all, and I'm going to start doing that myself. I'm inspired by that. I think that's great.
I think, well, thank you. It's just, I think it's just nice, like seeing that, like the process. I feel like it gives my own natal Saturn and Aries just a peace of mind that
Yes.
like good things take time and we need to even with like the structures of the houses that get built, like you need to have a good structure to build the house upon. Otherwise it's
Yeah.
not going to be good.
Yeah.
Yep. And
And
okay, sorry, finish your thought
oh
because I
no,
want to
no,
say
you're
something,
good.
because
Well,
I
I
want to
think
say something different.
okay, okay, perfect. Well, I think with trees in general, you're hitting on something for me that I always find like remedial in terms of like experiencing seasonal depression, and melancholia that Saturn can often bring about, or give us a propensity for in these seasons. Like, take a picture of a tree every day, and you'll see that it needs to rest in the exact same way that you need to rest as well, and it needs to, flowers need to be dormant. Certain flowers need dormancy to come back every year, and I think that's just a really hard lesson to learn, but it's easy if you look hard enough to see it everywhere around you, especially in nature.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So, okay. The point that I mean, it is like it's in there, but it just not exactly this. But it has to do with agriculture. And
Yes,
I think it's also a very Saturn, Venus, certainly Saturn and Libra process, like winemaking. That
love it.
is something that takes time and certainly actually gains quality and gets even more expensive the longer it's what is that process called in English? I'm forgetting the word.
Fermentation.
Fermentation. Yeah.
Yes.
Like it takes time for to get good wine, and that's why we say the saying it aged like fine wine.
Yep.
So
Yep. Or
that
we
is
in
yeah.
Saturn in Aries, I say she's aged like a fine boxed wine, about any situation. But yes, I think that's so true. But I also think it's funny because like grapes and wine is so Dionysian,
Yeah.
and so it's like yeah. Again,
It's
there's that
almost more
relationship.
Jupiterian.
Yeah, oh yes, true, totally. But there's that relationship between, yes, Saturn and Jupiter, who
Hmm.
also, they're diurnal planets. They have this affinity, strange affinity for each other, that I think definitely can, we can trace that line through winemaking and wine drinking as well.
Agreed. Yeah, it's almost like the well, this is not going to completely make sense with the signs, but the fact that it's like we get Jupiter, Saturn, Saturn, Jupiter, so Sag, Cap, Aquarius, and then Pisces
Right.
is like I would say maybe the harvest part of all of that is Sag, and then the whole fermentation process is happening during the Cap and Aquarius time, and then the wine drinking is happening in
In
with
Pisces
Pisces
season.
again. So
Yeah, I love it.
there is something to that, I certainly think. And yeah, I think Jupiter and Saturn are an interesting duo together because they're
Yeah.
both have a lot to do with structures, although different. Jupiter is a lot more about the structures we have in our mind and our beliefs, and obviously our beliefs inform how we wake up and go out into the world and what we do or what we not do, or how we internalize our experiences, or like it's like depending on if you believe that like there is a God or there isn't a God,
Right.
saying God very loosely here, it's
Sure.
gonna really impact how you show up in life or how you take in experiences. And then we kind of get Saturn where it gets a bit more, I guess, serious, maybe, if I can put it like that. And it's very much like, we can take the example here again of like the house making, where this is like, okay, we're drawing the structure, we're putting it like into form, and then Saturn is the building process, and it's like, is it that actually gonna last? Like,
Yeah.
does it actually function? Um,
Yeah.
and that's kind of that process, I think, between like Jupiter, Saturn, where it's like, okay, like we need to expand, we need to constrict, we need to constrict, we need to expand.
Yeah, I know. I think that's spot on. And they both have faith in common in a weird way. Like
Yeah.
I think believing that time will yield something is a very Saturnian struggle, or something that Saturn often brings, like waiting. Waiting and patience require faith that the thing that you want to come about either will come about, or that you will see some sort of return from the current struggle that you are experiencing if you just hold on long enough. And I think Jupiter and Saturn both definitely pertain to faith. Jupiter being a more ecstatic faith, and Saturn being a more measured faith, or faith through doubt. But I'm getting a bit theological with it.
That's completely fine. I think all of this has a place here. I think there's many ways that we can experience this planet, and one of the big fascinations of mine is just finding like yet another way where I can like grasp Saturn or feel Saturn.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah, I feel the same.
okay, we're back from a small little break, and we are going to continue talking about the joy of the 12th house of, well, wait, I kind of said that very weirdly, but basically Saturn having its joy in the 12th house, which, I think makes sense. Like, which house would Saturn have a good time in, and like being in? It's probably not like the second house or the third house.
No,
So, yes, but anyhow, the Saturn has its joy in the 12th house, and there's especially in ancient texts, I think there, and the joys of the houses do also come from more like ancient times and interpretations. So we're gonna get into that, and also like just to like make you aware of why Saturn would do well in that 12th house. And that doesn't mean, by the way, that if you have Saturn 12th house that your life is gonna be like extremely easy. It's still Saturn at the end of the day. But it might just be able to do the Saturnian things in a Saturnian way without any hindrances.
totally. Yeah, I mean, you have written down here, which I think is really important, that the I often scare people with this by accident, but the 12th house is called the house of bad spirit.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, you have Saturn in the 12th, the 12th of bad spirit, and it's great, and it's the house of of terrible things. But no, I think that like when we talk about Saturn, we are and the 12th house, like when it's bringing about the things that it likes to bring about, it's like how well positioned is it to bring change, and like shifts the kind of tectonic shifts that it wants to bring into your life. And in the 12th house, it's very happy there because the 12th house is the place of enmity and isolation. And, Ibn Ezra said Saturn represents wandering. And the 12th house are those far, far bouts of wandering that we sometimes never return from, toward, the precipice, the deep abyss of the mind, and also quite literally like exile. And Saturn is also exile as well, or can represent exile in the 12th. But that might be an exile that you choose yourself if you have Saturn in the 12th.
Mhm.
Especially by day, it's like making the decision to leave or to live a more ascetic or monastic existence. That's very 12th house Saturn stuff.
Yeah, yeah. I think a lot of the themes around the 12th house are difficult, and certainly the ancient texts don't sugarcoat it as much as
No.
modern astrologers often do the 12th house, and I think it's both are valuable. I think certainly the 12th house shouldn't be demonized as much as it is, but it's also like there are experiences that are shitty, and like that's 12th
Yeah.
house
Yeah.
things. And again, it's I think a lot of the connotations, especially in ancient times, were around banishment, especially of
Totally.
being banished from your village because you didn't fit in, etc., etc. Very Saturnian experiences, and they also really kick in our survival years, right? And I think oftentimes when people in ancient times would delineate Saturnian themes or maybe other planets also in the 12th house, it would be something along those lines. So like, oh, there's a possibility of getting banished from your village or losing your mother at a young age or your father or not having relationships, I don't know, with Venus in the 12th house. By the way, okay, that's one example of it. If you have Venus in the
Right.
12th, don't fret, please. So there's a lot of these experiences of like loss and like not fitting in. And the 12th test is also difficult because it is in aversion to the ascendant, which means that the individual can't like fully grasp or see it. Interestingly enough, if you would have been born sooner, the 12th house would be the ascendant or where the ascendant was. So it is hard because it's something that is outside of our control or like was in our control, but it's not anymore. And these are that
Yeah.
experiences of again, Saturnian words of isolation, of feeling cut off. That's maybe more of a Martian word, but not like not belonging. Definitely, certainly is a good word to describe 12th house transits.
Also liminal, which is like a
Yeah, yeah,
very
yeah.
Aquarian uh word, an Aquarian notion. I mean, the first decan of Aquarius is called in 36 Faces by Austin Coppock, The Mark of Exile. And
Yeah.
so natural, there is going to be an affinity for that between Saturn and the 12th house, if you just have outsiderness or outsideness baked into both of the meanings of these things, it's just like the margins, even the margins of consciousness in um, more modern contexts. But yeah, I mean, I think about Saturn's association with caves as well. And
Hmm.
sometimes I think of like the 12th house is the cave of the subconscious or unconscious, or the cave of self-undoing. It's these kind of like places that we banish ourselves to when we experience things like fear and shame and just those more difficult emotions. And yeah, like you're saying, these things are all naturally a part of life, and these are just terms that we get to use to describe them, which is and should be helpful as opposed to making you feel scared.
Agreed. Yes. And there's certainly 12th house themes have to do with confinement. And as you
Yeah,
said, it can also be our own inner confinement. And, 12th house transits are always like, they make you face your subconscious, but they also make you face your subconscious. You can actually face it.
yeah,
So like that's the good thing and the bad thing about the 12th house and what we can kind of learn from that. And I do think there's a lot of, it's certainly it can also talk to like and we're going to talk a bit more about that with like medical astrology of like, hospital visits, often like mental health institutions can also be prisons, but can
yeah,
in a more positive way also mean going on a retreat on a remote island or
right.
going on a long pilgrimage all alone by yourself where you can ponder about life and what you want to do afterwards. It's just usually the place where or like when 12th house transit hit that kind of make us retrieve more. It's not like it's not a public place. It's not the 10th house. It's the 12th house. It's more hidden. It's not what's like up there. It's very, and you know, there's a reason why the 12th, 8th, and 4th house form a trine with each other. All these
Yeah.
houses are very, very private. It's not what you show to the world. It's very much what's happening in the background, like the backstage of your life. Not a lot of people get to like know the like mostly like intimate people get to know these sides of you, but the 12th house I feel like that is like the most intimate place, like maybe the place that it's really like just between you and God or whatever you want to say, you know, like some divine
Yeah.
force. I think that's very much the 12th house. And also, I think one place, like if you have 12th house transits going on, a wonderful time to connect to the planets. Or if you have even a specific planet that is going to your 12th house, connecting to that planet. Exactly. So, if you have Saturn
Yeah.
going to your 12th house, an amazing time to start building a relationship with
Yeah,
Saturn.
building it in privacy and finding out what it
Yes.
means specifically for you. Yeah, and I just think the 12th house is the place where the silence is, and that can be so fulfilling and nourishing, and it can also be really scary. So it is, yeah, so much of both, but um, yeah, I love that. The 12th house synastry also is a huge thing that like a lot of people talk about as being
Mm,
a really, really intense experience. It's no wonder, you know?
agreed. Yeah. Yeah. There's, I mean, you
I've
know,
had it.
yeah, same here. But I do just also want to make people aware, you know, there's before this series, there was a whole 12th house series talking about all the houses. And obviously, we talked about the 12th house. And like, there's a whole segment there you can listen to where we talk about 12th house synastry and all that. Like, if you want to deep dive on the 12th house, like, check that out there. That's definitely going to be useful and helpful. Yeah, I think the 12th house is like it's like a gray area, I think, where there's just not a
Mm,
lot of motion and that can be scarier sometimes, like you said, as things actually going on, but because it's so like in between
yeah.
worlds and like it's a passageway almost. And I'm thinking of this bench in the town where I'm living. We have benches with quotes on them. I love that. One of them is there's a lot of noise, but only one stillness. And that for me is so Saturnian.
Oh, I
And
love that.
I love coming back to that. I think that's such a
Yeah.
12th house process of like,
That's, yes.
yep,
Spot on. Yeah, exactly.
in a good way. Yeah. Is there anything else you want to add to the 12th house specifically?
Oh, we were giggling about the ancient 12th house significations and the ancient Saturnian significations, where again I'm going back to Ibn Ezra, who talked about how Saturn is responsible for big and ugly animals. And one of the like medieval significations of the 12th house is animals bigger than a goat. And so again, there's like a weird hyper-specific affinity there between Saturn and the 12th house that is not just experiential, but also, you know, hilariously literal.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed. Okay, well, there's nothing that I specifically have. I think there's a lot of things we're going to circle back around
For
in
sure.
some of the other things that we're going to talk about, which I think now we're going to go get to one of the maybe longest segments on here. I think we're going to start off by like maybe talking a bit about Saturn retrogrades. I don't think there's too much to say about them, but worth mentioning. Then the Saturn synodic cycle, and then we can talk about Saturn returns,
Yeah.
which is a big thing, right? I mean, it's this. I think after like Mercury retrogrades and eclipses that a lot of people, even they're not astrologers, they know about that. I think after that, maybe Saturn return is somewhere in that realm as well, where people tend to like know something is up there. And I
Nice Saturn
think
return.
and I
Yeah.
think most people, even if they don't know astrology, would tend to agree that some life-changing stuff is happening when you're turning 30.
Absolutely. And it's the biggest thing where I'm like, you're skeptical about astrology? Well, what insane life shift happened to you when you turned 29?
Yeah.
And then people are like, oh shit, okay, no, you're right. There's something,
Yeah,
there is
exactly.
something very weird going on.
Exactly. So, Saturn retrogrades. I mean, I think outside of the other retrogrades, Mercury retrogrades happen like 3 to 4 times a year,
Right.
very notoriously known. Venus and Mars retrogrades happen a bit rarer, and there's usually a big event. After that, like with Jupiter and everything after that, that are retrogrades that happen once a year, every year. So
Yeah.
in that regard, they aren't really significant because like half a year almost Saturn is retrograde. And so
Yes.
are the outer planets. So there isn't like a specifically weird pattern or something that we get like a Venus retrograde, like oh that's going to be like very poignant and concentrated in that part. And also because Saturn moves slowly. Saturn is in a sign for 2.5 years. We get Saturn in a sign for a pretty long time. So when
Yeah.
Saturn is going retrograde, I think it's not, it isn't something that is like super deeply felt. Like maybe the stations, yes, I would agree with that. But during the
Yes.
process, and it's like I said something similar in the Jupiter episode, like I wouldn't be able to tell you exactly what Saturn is doing in my life right now. Whereas when Venus is retrograde, I'm like, I know like exactly, like, okay, this is the Venus retrograde story that is going on.
Yeah.
Saturn is, yeah, I think a lot of Saturn is getting the lessons by the end of the transit once you look back and see what you've went through, not so much during the time in and of itself. But I'm curious what you have to add or say about Saturn retrogrades.
No, I think you're so spot on and you kind of said it
Said
all.
it all.
It just moves so slowly that, Mercury is a very fast-moving planet. Venus is also fast-moving. You can really feel like with the whiplash. And with Saturn, that pole stretching doesn't really allow us to, again, yeah, like you're saying, get a hold of the energy in the moment or in the present time that it's happening. One thing I will say about Saturn retrogrades is that I think that they matter much more in terms of the Saturn return, because oftentimes
Mm,
Saturn retrogrades are most significant when you are like looking at or delineating the timing of a Saturn return chart, because it will kind of show you the ripples that Saturn makes away and toward the eye of the
yeah.
storm. Just for if you are making a pivot from if Saturn reached its natal degree in your chart and then it separates from it, and then there's a station where it moves back toward it. That's when you do kind of feel that whiplash. And again, like you're saying, you might not be able to describe it in the moment, but you can kind of sense like there is something weird going on. Why are these themes coming back more strongly? It's like I'm not done with you, like that invisible lasso pulling you back. And that's especially intense where, Saturn is stationing over a sign boundary, like it recently has been
Mhm.
with Saturn in Pisces and Saturn in Aries. And so I have been getting a lot of friends and clients and people being like, whoa, like feeling really shaken up. And, myself included, because when Saturn steps over into that ingress and then dials it back, it can be very jarring. So those are more intense versions of what Saturn retrograde can feel like. But if it's, a more ambient transit for you, you might not directly feel its effects.
Yes, yes, I think it's also worth mentioning that if Saturn is aspecting any of your natal planets,
Yes, yes, yes,
usually the
absolutely.
retrogrades will probably also be a bit louder because of, let's say Saturn is squaring your natal Venus. Like you're probably gonna
Totally.
feel the story of that interplay between those planets a lot more. But if Saturn isn't like doing really anything, like not really aspecting anything in your chart during its retrograde period or direct period, it's probably not going to be felt directly, or the story arc won't be so clear. And again, I think the when Saturn is like, I think Saturn and a lot of these slower moving planets, they tend to be like really loud when they ingress into a sign, and you're like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
I can see the new playing field. I can see the
Yeah.
new like lessons I need to be learning right now. And then you kind of forget. And then when Saturn is
Well, it
like,
just becomes your
or
reality,
yeah, or it just becomes your
Yeah.
reality. And then at the end of that transit, there's like this reflection period going on, and you're like, oh, I can see like the Saturnian lessons that I learned right now. I think a lot of people are reflecting right now back on Saturn
Definitely.
and Pisces, of course. Saturn and Pisces is it already at 29 degrees? It's definitely like 28 degrees, I
I'm
think.
pretty sure it is. Yeah. A friend of mine
Somewhere
just
at the
posted
somewhere
15
there.
more sleeps until Saturn and Aries, and I'm like, please do not do that to me. Don't do that to us.
So that is, yeah, like that's like we are literally in that period right now where like the final lessons are
Yeah.
wrapping up, and I think it can feel really annoying because it's like, oh, yeah, I think most planets, but especially Saturn, and also slower moving because they're sitting at these last degrees for so much longer than the other ones. It can feel very
Yes.
frustrating of like, oh, I want to let
Yes.
go of this old thing and start the new chapter, but it's not fully here yet. So,
Yeah.
I do think that is up in the air right now. And then once this is up, Saturn is in Aries, and we have unlocked the new world map. So
Absolutely. Yeah. We're just
we're
finding the
in
key.
it.
We're doing the puzzle to find the key to get into the next level right now. In very Pisces style.
Yeah, and I also what I've observed, and again, I would say that's from up to like Saturn and Capricorn and everything after that, is that usually when Saturn ingresses into new sign, it feels really fresh because it's like, oh, like finally I can like get away from this.
Yeah.
Feels very refreshing. And then once we're in it for like 1.5 years, it starts getting like annoying, and you're like, oh, I can't like sit with these Saturnian lessons anymore.
Right.
So,
Yeah,
yeah.
it reveals itself as something you will never actually get away from. Not to, again, not to be doom and gloom, just to be realistic. It's
Yeah,
like
no, for real.
that's just what happens.
Yes. And so I think, well, okay, no, we have to talk first about the synodic cycle of Saturn, which is the synodic cycle is the interplay of the planets with the sun, basically, because the sun is the key player. The planets, there's basically always at least once a year that the planets come together with the sun. In this case, Saturn is slower moving than the sun, so the sun is actually catching up with Saturn every year, not vice versa. And we get one conjunction, or well, with the sun, it's called Kazemi moment, right? Because the planet gets in the heart of the sun, and it's like a reset moment for this cycle. It's almost like this. I think we could say like a new moon for the planets, where it's like a new seed is being planted, and this new kind of like chapter starts, and then 1 year later we get the same thing. So and I think these seeding moments are pretty important. I think it's going to be really interesting with Saturn in its fall and the sun in its exaltation this
I
time around.
know. I was thinking about yeah, the enmity. Again, there's another key word that keeps coming up, but like the enmity between, yeah, Saturn and the sun's place of exaltation. I was just thinking about your example of those, younger people who likely had like Saturn and Leo. Like coming in and being like, and you being like, "Whoa, I'm too old for this." So I am also really curious as to how that is going to come into play or come about.
Yeah, and I don't know if you have anything specifically to say about that Kazemi moment in and of itself, if you do.
Not really. I think you hit it for me.
Yeah, no. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
It's again, it's really just imagine it like a new moon is it's a new start for that planet with the sun, and like kind of a small reset moment.
It's
Uh
like burning a layer
yeah.
off.
Yeah. Yes. And I think it's going to be of course prior to that first we're going to get Also, much talked about Saturn and Neptune conjunction at 0 degrees of Aries, which is a seeding moment in and of itself.
Yeah.
But I think we're gonna like really, at least with Saturn, well, with Neptune too, right? But once Sun ingresses into Aries, like I feel like that's when it's really gonna hit off for a lot of people what happens at that conjunction. Because it's gonna happen like roughly a month later, maybe not even. Uh, so definitely watch out for that moment. I don't know the exact date right now, but it's gonna be what,
I
like a
know I
few
can't
days
remember.
after the Sun ingresses into Aries, because it's gonna be like still right at the beginning. So, sometime like mid-March, I would say that this is happening. And now let's get into notorious Saturn return territory.
Oh yeah.
No one's going to talk about it.
I know I'm like, and scene. No, I mean, I think something that I want to debunk right away is, you're talking about how people talk about eclipses and lunations and Mercury retrograde, and that's all really popular, and so are Saturn returns, but the misconception is that you only have one Saturn return in your life.
That is a
In a
misconception,
perfect
yeah.
world, you will have two. Typically, you have two, given, the average lifespan. And the number one question I get asked when people come to me for Saturn return readings is when is it over? Like everybody wants to know
That is
when
so
Saturn
true.
will stop exerting influence over their chart and over their life. And then I have to be like, well, it's not, because not only do we have Saturn returns, but we also have Saturn squares, Saturn oppositions. Saturn is always, I wrote something about this. Saturn doesn't just fall out of the sky. It is always touching something in your chart, even if it's an empty house. It's always exerting control. But obviously, a Saturn return, when Saturn moves back into its natal sign in your chart, is going to be incredibly intense. And a huge, culmination of lessons. You have, maturity, growth. Richard Tarnas wrote about this and said in Cosmos in Psyche, the Saturn return transit generally coincides with what might be called a period of biographical crystallization, visible not only in external events, but also in a certain solidifying of the individual's psychic constitution and establishing of the basic structure of the personality. So in a shorter term, that this changes everything.
Agreed, yeah. Yeah, you also put something here about like the second and the first. So I don't know if you want to
Oh
talk a bit
yeah.
about that.
Well, so I was chatting with a client that I was reading for at like an event. I did a little birth chart birthday party, and she was having her second Saturn return. She has Saturn in Aries, so she was moving into that space, and I was like, God bless you, Janice. I really feel you. But we were just chatting about her experience with the first Saturn return, and the first Saturn return kind of sets the stage and gives you that refraction and that restructuring and that reshaping. And all of the Saturn transits that happen in between reinforce or like test that kind of framework that the first Saturn return led you to construct within yourself. And then the second Saturn return, you revisit those themes, but kind of as a solidification of them. And as someone who has learned those lessons, you kind of go on retrial almost. Um, but it's usually from a different perspective that you experience them, obviously due to the maturation process. And the second Saturn return might contain, because of when it happens, it's like 56. Um, I believe. I can't do math. I'm just here to look pretty and talk a lot. But it coincides with relative midlife. And so a lot of that does have to do with mortality, you aging, the people around you, you probably will significant or experience a significant death. as my lovely client was experiencing the death of a parent for her second return. I'm not saying that's going to happen to everybody, but it's more likely that themes of mortality will come about in the second Saturn return.
Agreed. Yeah. Yeah, it's around the so first Saturn return is around like 27 till 30.
Yeah,
The next one is we could say 57 to 60. It's
57
always
to
in like
60.
this like 30-year increments. And so again, and if you're lucky, you might get one then at what is it like 50 sorry oh my God, numbers. I talk too many languages and we say numbers
Well,
differently.
I know it's like our job is doing math, and yet,
So 87 till 90
yes, yes, yes,
would be
yes,
the
if you're
third Saturn
lucky.
return.
Which is interesting because that's also, ideally, if you are to experience, like I just had a loved one die at 86, like you are experiencing hopefully a long and conscious death and embodied death process, ideally around that time, you know? Yeah, but I also think Saturn squares, I mean, again, I'm coming to this with my own special bent of Saturn is about mortality and death for me. But Saturn squares, I think about, every 7 years or so, Saturn's doing something in your chart. But
Mhm.
when you are 7 years old, you get your first Saturn square, and 7 years old is generally, you might have experienced loss before then, but in a child's development, that is largely when you actually understand the concept of loss and grief and can internalize and integrate that. Um, Even though I believe something, I mean, I'm sure Saturn's doing something to the chart before then. But
Yeah, like I think the first Saturn to natal Saturn transit we're getting is like this opening Saturn sextile.
yes, yeah, 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 exactly. Yes.
So that's like the first one we're getting. Then we're I guess it's hard to like say like, it's almost I feel like we would need a visual for it to
I
make
know
sense.
I'm
Like if
getting a
you're not
little
an astrologer,
granular.
it's
Yeah,
gonna be a bit hard to visualize this, but essentially if we're, like, it's gonna be a sextile, then it's gonna be a square, then it's gonna be a trine, then it's gonna be a closing square. Then it's gonna be a oh no, sorry, it's gonna be a closing trine
opposition.
first after the opposition, then a closing square, then a closing sextile, and then you get the Saturn return.
Everyone's like,
Amazing
okay, and now
visual.
what does that mean?
Yeah, what does that mean? I know, right? That's always when you realize when you're talking to an astrologer and you can just say that, and when you're talking to a non-astrologer, it's like, what does that mean?
Totally, yeah.
So I'm gonna kind of like have this book here on the side just so and that's again Saturn in Transit by Erin Sullivan. Hope I'm pronouncing the
You
name right.
are, and this is like a really instrumental text for me
Yes,
too. I'm so
yes.
glad that you brought this to the table.
Yeah, I just want to like just so we get like the time frames right and everything and we don't give
Totally.
the people any like misinformations. Could happen with our amazing number skills.
I know. I'm like, let someone else do the math.
Yeah, and actually before I say that, we were talking before off camera or off recording about how there's a lot of people that don't even know astrology. Like one way that you can, for lack of better words, convince them that astrology is real is when you be like, well, what happened to your life around 29 years? And a
Yeah,
lot of people would be like, oh, that was
yeah,
something crazy happened in my life at that time. So,
totally.
yeah, of course, you have to be talking to someone that is over 30 years old. Otherwise, that does not apply.
Sure. Yeah.
Otherwise, that does not apply. Okay, so we have yeah, so first she said she's talking about like that natal Saturn to Saturn square, which is from birth till 7 years old. And then we get that what I said, like that sextile to natal sextile. Well, first she's actually talking about a moon Saturn phase, which is like birth till 3.5 years old, which is like the development of security,
There it
where
is.
the horoscope like depicts the separation from the infant mother makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Um, And what is it? I underlined something here. I guess I can read that. By the time Saturn has made just one revolution around the zodiac and returned to its natal place, the Sun has returned 29 times, Mars 14 times, Jupiter 1.5 times, and the Moon 383 times.
Oh my God. Yeah, well,
Interesting too.
we see why Saturn doesn't like the moon again. But I also think that this is really, I mean, this is through I feel like this entire book is through a very psychological lens, which you and I were talking about. Like, we
Yeah, that's
like to
true, yeah.
both bring to the table with our work and like straddling traditional delineation and historic texts with the felt experiences and sensations of the planets. But I think with Saturn, individuation is like the psychological keyword that we're looking at because obviously like separation from the mother and that concept of like a child recognizing its own reflection as
Mm,
as itself as opposed to its mother as a their mother as a reflection of them. um that is kind of what's being described with that moon Saturn relationship early on in the life. But what Saturn is doing in the chart is just delivering a series of opportunities for individuation, which is interesting because separation is a key word with Mars. Um, but Saturn does that too. Like Saturn wants to close you off and compartmentalize you so that you are self-sufficient in many ways.
agreed, yeah. Yeah, and and then we get to that like Saturn square to Saturn opposition, which is from like 7 till 14 years old,
Yep.
which is kind of the development of personality. And that's when a lot of people, depends on which country you're from, but I would say definitely when people like start off with school for the most part.
Yeah,
And that's
totally.
definitely also like an individuation process where it's like, okay, you're really like you're doing something now. Like you're in the process of learning and developing like relationships outside of your family with other people. And it's like first maturity process. Yeah,
Yeah,
and
and you
then
are
yeah.
unique. You're discovering that you are your own person who experiences your own reality in your own way.
Agreed. And I think it's an interesting, it doesn't, it happens like between those ages. And then like when we hit 14, that's like really when we get that like Saturn opposition thing going on.
Yeah,
But like in between that is, when you go into teenagehood from child to teenagehood, and that is a
totally.
huge process. It's also actually very Jupiterian because we get our first Jupiter return when we're like around the ages of 12. Makes
Right.
sense. Hormones kick in, growth kicks in, growth kicks in.
Yeah,
And then Saturn is obviously also in the background doing things, and there's I'm just looking at like, there's some like lines that underline, and here it is like where society does not provide a rite of passage, the psyche does, and these years are filled with childhood dramas. And I think that's like exactly that
totally.
time, like from opening Saturn square to Saturn opposition
Yeah.
that are going on.
I also remember when I like became a teenager. That is the first time that you kind of, or like one kind of typically has that experience that you and I were talking about at the age that we are now of looking back and realizing that you are in a different age group or occupying a different space in time and in your youth than you were. Like I remember like when I was 14 years old, I had a huge crisis of being like, I will never be a child again, which is just
Yeah,
also
totally.
so Saturn opposition, and kind of like figuring out what it looks like, and straddling that melancholy and sadness and nostalgia with also like that fight to be like, okay, well, I guess I have to perform an entirely new structure for myself and that might mean, like secretly getting my nose pierced or whatever. Like, it's like
Yeah.
the rebellion or like desire to create a new drastic, because Saturn is very drastic sometimes, new structure um, jumps out during that first Saturn opposition.
Agreed. I think 14 is a very poignant age. Like it's an
Yeah.
age that I remember quite well. And for me, that like opposition actually coincided with and that makes sense with 6th, 12th house. But for the first time, getting like extremely anemic and having to go to the hospital.
Wow,
Um,
yes.
which is interesting. You'd think like, okay, Saturn's in Libra, like that's, like and Libra in the 12th house.
Right, exactly. It
But
depends all it all depends. Yeah, it's
it all
relative.
depends, exactly. But it was and obviously I didn't know at that time. I didn't know astrology, but like when I was looking back, I was like shocked. I was like, what? That happened around that time?
Yep.
And certainly, the fact that Aries or Mars rules over like iron and blood, and
Blood.
Saturn restricted that makes a lot of sense for me that this happened during that opposition moment. And I wasn't in the hospital for super long, but it did obviously isolate me from my schoolmates, and I just
Mhm.
started, I guess, the equivalent of high school here. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
And so it was like just at the beginning of a new school year with a lot of new people, and I was like not there. So
Yeah.
that was
Totally.
certainly 12th house, Libra 12th house transit. I don't know if you have like a specific story that you remember. Totally fine if you don't, but
Oh
just
God. Well, I'm
saying
sure I do, but it might be a little more than anybody needs to know about me.
that that is completely
Uh,
fine. That is absolutely.
but I can certainly think of a thing or two for certain from that time. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you don't you don't have to. But if something comes
I'm
to
like,
mind,
I
absolutely feel
know.
free to do so. Absolutely free to do so. And
Yeah.
yeah, in between, that like Saturn opposition to like the ages of 21 when we get that closing Saturn square, we also have another trine moment, and I would say the trine like natal Saturn transiting Saturn trying to natal Saturn.
Perfect.
It isn't that hard to pronounce, but anyhow, is I would say
No,
that's
no, it's
usually
just the
it's a
internal
lot. It's a lot.
constellation of it.
I would say that's usually like a more constructive or pleasant time, and probably filled with growth and all of these things. Um, yeah, but oppositions by nature are Saturnian, so
Right.
they can be a lot, but it is really that time of like teenagehood where you're like, I'm gonna do everything that my parents didn't do, or
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
gonna
yeah.
oppose everything they stand for. Like I don't want to have anything to do with the stupid things that I grew up in. I don't want to wear pink anymore. I don't want to wear,
Yes.
like that's that time.
And here we see Saturn's relationship to authority, because Saturn can often
Yeah,
represent authority, which I feel like we haven't even said yet somehow. 2 hours
that is
in,
true.
that is so important. And it also represents authority as, parent as authority in many cases. So yes, totally. That's very like fuck you, mom. Like that is so Saturn opposition, because there's this kind of like explosive reaction to swinging all the way to the other end of the structure that you know and the rules that you know. Yeah, whereas a Saturn trining natal Saturn um, can be a push of support more
Mhm.
so in the direction of individuation, where you don't feel like you are necessarily doing something just to fill that negative space, but you are doing something because you are understanding a structure of your life or something about you that feels more real. And you might just get kind of like a shove toward that version of yourself.
Mm.
Or a good encounter with discipline, or a desire to get good at something or focus on something.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's also, yeah, good point you brought that up. Just as Jupiter transits can sometimes bring in teachers into our lives and
Yeah,
mentors, Saturn transits can bring in like the same thing, but obviously sometimes in a more harsh way, like
yeah,
teachers that like need to teach you or again are here for individuation or bringing you to the next maturity process in life, and that can certainly be like a Saturn trine where you realize like, oh, maybe my parents aren't that bad and like I can hang out with them and they
right.
can teach me things.
I also think the way that I see Saturn squares too, and I think that this is especially true, I'm just noticing with Saturn and Aries, Like Saturn in Aries is so like it's like we have chronic opposition defiance disorder, many of us. That could just be the Aquarius stellium in me speaking. But like I think that it's very possible that a lot of people's current, you know, Saturn square, that if they have Saturn in Capricorn in their adult life and their post-Saturn return, might show up as a Saturn and Aries energy coming in to kind of like be insubordinate and challenge
Mhm.
their sense of authority. I know that I've already had a few people in my life like have that experience, and some friends who are like, "Whoa, I'm kind of being thrown for a loop here." And the opposite might be true for if you have Saturn in Aries, that Saturn in Capricorn energy when it comes in with a square might be, oh my God, someone is imposing structure on me that I am
Mhm.
not comfortable with or that I'm not used to working within, and that is terrifying.
Agreed. Agreed. And I think this is the where we like slowly move into that like closing Saturn square.
Yeah,
I'm using like opening and closing here because I think it is a bit of a different experience if we get an opening or a closing square, and you also have to imagine these opening and closing squares like that first quarter or that last quarter moon. So it's like the
right.
midway point between a new moon and a full moon, and squares are the nature of Mars. So there's always this energy of like needing to overcome something, which I like. I'm a bigger fan of squares than I am of oppositions because it feels like at least you can do something about squares. Like if it's annoying, but you can overcome them, and that is like around the ages of yeah, like beginning of 20s, like 22, 21, 22, 23, 24, maybe even 25. It like depends a bit on where your natal Saturn is.
Mm,
And that's like that last push, I think, of maturity you get before the Saturn return. Obviously, there's also a sextile in between those times, but I think it's a very significant time. I certainly notice that when I'm hanging around on Astro Reddit, that's the age that most people come to ask questions about astrology and they feel frustrated. They think their life is over. Like, I cannot tell you how many
yes.
people think their life is over at the beginning. I mean, put me in the same basket. I thought the same thing.
Yeah.
It's like I thought my life was also over at the beginning of my 20s when I suffered that burnout and I was just like I don't what the hell should I do now?
Yeah.
It's a very, very pivotal time. I think underestimated, like just how impactful it is besides the Saturn return. I think it's a very, very loud transit, certainly.
Absolutely. Yeah, and you wrote down in the notes, I don't want to yoink this out from under you, but I think it's really poignant that the 23rd year that happens within
Oh,
that
yeah.
closing Saturn square is the 12th house perfection year. And oh my God, is that a time to be like awash in despair and kind of that return of that feeling that you do not belong anywhere. I certainly had that experience at that time during that closing Saturn square
Oh,
in my
yeah.
12th house year. I was like truly grappling with, a sense of place and where in the world is for me, where do I feel comfortable, where do I belong? And so it can feel like that like second puberty almost before you're 25, just being like, oh God, like I don't have everything figured out by now. I
Yeah.
well I must give up, which is a very Saturnian thought process after all.
Yeah, it's like this feeling like I can't endure this. It's too
Yeah,
much.
well, that's
It's too
it.
much. It's too much. And at the same time, we must, and there's so much beauty that comes from that.
Oh, we must endure.
Yeah.
It's cruel, but we must endure. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm always sometimes I'm wondering people that don't have a the framework of astrology how they're coping with things because I
I
don't know
know.
what I would have done without that during that
Me
time.
neither.
And like there was just this moment where I was like, okay, I just need to hang on until like
Yeah.
this is kind of over and
Yeah,
then we'll figure it out from there. But I need to stay alive for this. And that like
exactly.
really helped me. So it's
And it gave
yeah.
me a task too. I'm like,
Yep.
okay, my
Yeah.
task is to cling. Not too tightly, but is exactly like you're saying. My task is to hold on. It's nice to have a sense of purpose, even if the purpose is just sitting tight.
Yeah, and I think the nice thing that kind of happens right after that year is like the 24th year, which is coincides with first of all, first house perfection year, but also usually the Jupiter, like the second Jupiter return.
Yeah,
And I think that is when a lot of and Erin also says that in the book is where a lot of like the values and beliefs and ethics of ourselves get like a lot more settled. And I think it's almost like bit of a reward after that very difficult period where things feel a little bit
yeah,
more hopeful and like, okay, I'm going somewhere. Like I have a new
yeah.
goal. Hmm.
Here is some truth at the very least.
Yes. Wait, let me just see. Let me, okay. I think this might also be interesting. The astrological cycles between 25 and 30, setting the stage for the Saturn return, are Saturn sextile Saturn at 25 and a half, 25 and a half. Uranus trine Uranus at 27, oh, certainly, to 28. Progress lunar return at 27 to 28. Oh, yeah, 27 is a very interesting
Yeah,
year after that as well. Neptune sextile Neptune at 28, and the new lunar nodal reversal at 28, and then Saturn return follows at 29 and a half. As might be imagined, the years from 27 to 30 are potentially chaotic. When a number of cycles amass at particular points in time, a crisis occurs. And it's so funny because I feel like if I didn't experience these like crisis moments from that initial closing Saturn square, I wouldn't be able to face this right now. Like
I
that, I would not be able to
absolutely.
handle it.
Yeah, I think you're so right. I mean, it's just it's more trusting in time and letting time do its thing. As annoying as that is, I hate that, and yet it is so true. But yeah, that's huge.
Yeah, and she also brings up a good point here, which, and I do think crises might, I mean, it's certainly a word I use a bit more with Mars, I would say, but I
Mm.
can understand why Saturn also brings in crises moments.
Oh
Certainly like
yes.
moments where you're questioning what you're doing with your life.
Yeah.
But she makes the point here that crises, or like the exact translation of the Greek word, it signifies separation, division, contention, selection, and then also decision and judgment, i.e., passing sentence. Crisis is a situation in which no values are of uncontested validity, no behavior indisputably correct. That is a very
Yeah.
Saturnian process.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, yeah, no behavior is correct. Or like, n I think that that really speaks to how I feel even about delineating Saturn returns and the attitude
Mm,
that I go into when I am talking to someone about their Saturn return or thinking about Saturn in general. Um, we were talking about eclipses briefly and how it's like, well, you're not gonna know what happens until you're there. We can show you the shape and we can kind of like feel around in the dark for the general qualities. But just like with grief and with death during big Saturn transits, there is no right way to act. There is no there is no right thing to do. You just have to take it as it comes and be with yourself, and that's often the worst and hardest part. But like there's no
mm.
right path of action. So I, as an astrologer, am not going to tell someone, here's what you need to do to survive your Saturn return, because you know the part of yourself that needs to shift. Like when you are so without, or when you have really lost something, you have to be responsible internally, and you know best about like what needs to change in order to fit yourself into that new chasm of being. So I'm really resonating with that, like no right way to navigate.
I agree. You also brought up a good point of it's it's so easy with astrology to future trip and project a
Yes.
lot of our current circumstances on the future.
Yeah.
Uh, Certainly that was my reaction when I had that closing Saturn square. I was like, well, if that's my closing Saturn square, then I'm not going to make it during my Saturn return.
Totally. Yeah.
But now it's here and I feel totally equipped and ready to handle it.
You can't know what tools you'll have, and that's part
Exactly.
of the horrors, you know? Like you don't know what is going to be on your side or how you're going to be able to show up for yourself. But you will be.
You will be, yes.
You
I
will
think
be.
that's a great point, and it's just because Saturn has so much to do with maturity. It's you're going to be a different person once you enter that Saturn return. And again, like a lot of people think their life is over at the beginning of their 20s or like what are we going to do? And then it gets like a lot, I mean, easier. I don't know. I certainly just think we get the better tools to face adversities, and that's why it gets easier. Or we
Yeah,
just are able to face the challenges in a different way. You know, it's like levels, like in a game, you know, it's like you can't face Monster 30 when you're level 22 and you're at your closing Saturn square, but when you're level 30, you
totally.
get to face that monster. So
Totally.
it's that
Exactly.
type of thing. Yep. And I don't know if you want to say anything about like the Saturn return itself. I feel like we said a lot about the Saturn return itself, but that's like, you know, obviously now after that closing Saturn square, we would get to that Saturn return again.
Yeah.
So,
I don't know if I have more. I mean, there's always more to say, but like as right now, I don't know if I have more to add. It's so
that is
vast,
fine.
you know.
Well, I mean, you know, after that is or actually wait, let me add this. There's
Please.
before that, we will have all the other planetary returns already that we have experienced. And
Totally.
Saturn, oh yeah, maybe this is where I can add it in. Saturn is also often referred to as the Lord of Time and Karma, which karma is a big word and many people associate very different things with it. When I say karma,
Yeah.
I mean it in a very simple way of reaction to action. Like, you know, just you're getting a reaction to something that you did.
Yeah.
And that can mean a lot of
Consequence.
things.
Yeah.
And that's often what Saturn returns are also a lot like, you know, facing your shit, basically taking responsibilities for the actions that you did, or like now you can't really run away from that anymore. And it's I think that moment where astrologically oftentimes you say that is actually when you're an adult.
Yeah.
So it's you're like kind of like an astrology infant before your Saturn return, and after that is like a new world because you're entering now you're consciously entering the new Saturn rounds from a very different perspective. So I think
Yeah.
that is
You
definitely good to say.
sparked something for me also,
Okay, heck
in
yeah.
that where I've just been thinking about like this metaphor of during your second Saturn return, like the first return feels like the tools that you forge to use during your second Saturn return. So it's like whether or not you I don't know, like take the challenge and rise to it. You could always not. It won't feel good, but you know, I feel like taking the challenge and what you take under advisement and what changes you and shifts you around in the first Saturn return, that is the kind of like to use a martial term, like artillery that
Yeah.
you are working with for your second Saturn return. Of course, there's so much in between, but there will be echoes, obviously, because it is the same planet returning to the same place, and so there will be a lot of like, oh, that's why that happened. So again, like that Saturnian hindsight is so long, it's almost
Mm,
endless. Um, so there are times when you might not even be able to see your first Saturn return or its returns, for lack of a better term,
yeah.
until your second. Um, yeah, I also hear in my head people laughing at two astrologers who haven't finished their Saturn returns yet, talking about
It
this.
is a bit of a meme.
It's a bit of a meme, and you know, it'll be funnier as time goes on. It'll age like a fine boxed wine. But I also think about how many people I've seen who work in this field, like my best friend who's a psychic medium, who her Saturn return completely shifted the way that she interacted with intuition and opened up these kind of clarified these channels or abilities that she had, and I see that happen with a lot of people who work in the fields that we
Mm,
work in, where there might be a kind of attunement or a shift in reality that accommodates the like extrasensory portion of perception.
yeah. Yeah, totally. Is I think there's also, I mean, societally, there's such a big like push and notion to achieve certain things. It's
Right.
like if you don't achieve them before you're 30, you're basically a loser or something like that,
Yes,
which I
yes.
think puts
Well,
people
you're
in
not.
such, yeah, you're not, but it puts people in such a stupid position where it's like, well, you haven't even like grown up astrologically. Like, you don't
Yeah.
have to be a life coach at 22 years old. Like, you don't have to have it figured out. Like, it's okay.
Yeah, and I also think this is the Saturn and Aries lesson is like knowing what you don't know. You
Yeah.
know, you get these inklings and propensities before your Saturn return, and then this is the refining block. This is like the whetstone. This is where we get sharp, and get hurt in the process, maybe, but absolutely that maturation is everything.
Yeah, I remember when Saturn was in Aquarius, I was well, not only was I getting into ancient Hellenistic astrology, but I was also listening to a lot of like books and podcasts, people that are way older, like people past their second Saturn return.
Oh yeah.
That was so helpful for me to realize
Yeah.
that the greatest things that they have achieved in life were like when they were 50 or 60 or whatever.
Yes,
Um,
exactly.
I think it's so important that we also hear these voices and for people to know that like no, your life is not over. Like you can write a book and become a bestseller at 65. You
I
you can
still
marry the love
feel
of your
this
life at
way.
70. Like I
Yeah.
don't know.
Right now, that's a way that I remediate Saturn
Oh,
is listening to the perspectives of people who went into like did career pivots or figured out who they were much later on in life. And I think especially with Saturn and Aries, there's that like rush to the finish of like
yeah.
I gotta do it yesterday, you know. But I find so much comfort in being like, okay, like Elvira wasn't a show until Cassandra Peterson was 30 years old. Like all of these people who I adore were really doing things later in their lives, and it takes time to figure out what you want. It's like we can look up to people who took their time and took also like unexpected opportunities.
Oh yeah.
That's the upside of Saturn. There's so much give and take where like you will receive things that you do not even expect and hurt in ways that you cannot even imagine, and it has to be both.
Oh yeah. Yeah, actually you sparked something different in me as well, which I think is worth talking about with the Saturn return is that it's Saturn returns, but Saturn is always going to affect your Capricorn and Aquarius part of your chart. And if you do
Always.
have planets in Capricorn or Aquarius, they're also going to get a maturity boost during your Saturn return. And like gain new life experience. And I think it's also like the tell old story of Capricorn and Aquarius risings, where they just feel like they're off, and then once they realize I'm ruled by Saturn and like my life is
Yeah.
gonna get better once I age,
Yeah.
that is, I think a lot of these folks find a lot of like solace and like once they figure that out and like knowing that like, oh, I think the difficult periods of my life were probably when I was younger, and now it's kind of again it's like fine wine, like a lot
Totally.
of these placements are going to mature like fine wine, but it's going to take
Yes.
time and it's probably going to be hard, and I think especially Saturn in Aries is very prone to be pushed into a lot of premature things. I think I heard I don't know where it was in the astrology podcast, but I know that Austin talked about this somewhere along the lines of this like super young king or something, being put like, now you're king. You're
Yeah.
7 years old. Now you're king. You
Surprise.
rule over the country.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, what are you
Absolutely.
gonna
What are
do?
we gonna do? What are we gonna do with that? Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's just accepting that some things you are too young to do yet.
Yeah, totally.
Um, God.
Totally.
Yeah.
And then we're not going to talk about all of this in detail, I feel like, but because like after a Saturn return, what is going to happen? the same transits, just in a different round.
Keep it
You're gonna
rocking.
get s- from Saturn return to Saturn square. That's gonna be from like 30 till 36, and then you're also gonna have Saturn square to second Saturn opposition, 37 till 44. Then you're gonna have second Saturn opposition to Saturn square at 45 to 52, and then this is leading up to, again, Saturn square to second Saturn return from 52 till 59, or I would even go so far as to say till 60. And so it's like you're undergoing the same like process, and there's probably also going to be a lot of themes. When once you hit that first Saturn square, probably a lot of themes from that first initial Saturn square when you were younger are all of a sudden
Yeah.
going to be present. And it's also often a time where you know, completely fine if you don't have children, but just in the case you do, it's, like you're in the position right now that you were in, that your kid is in right now.
Yes.
And that's also, I think, yep, like an interesting process as a parent. And sometimes people, if you birth your child during your Saturn return, you're going to have the same Saturn as your kid. Like you're going to both
Yes.
have the same
Yes.
Saturns, which
Yep.
is yeah, it's really interesting if you go through the same things, but the child is doing it for the first time and you're doing it from the for the second time.
Exactly. Yeah, I was just thinking as you're talking also about how beautiful it is that Saturn teaches us that we're never done growing. Like how
Mm-hmm.
incredible is that? It is, I think, a thing that I would like to take with me for my whole life is that like I'm not going to be done growing or being challenged or changing until I take my last breath, you know? And Saturn transits teach me that.
Yes, I think that's good. Is there anything else you want to talk about with Saturn transits or
Oh
anything
no,
that
I think we beat them right into the ground. So I think yeah, I'm good.
Okay, I think one thing that's maybe worth mentioning, we kind of talked a bit about this before. Saturn is obviously like now we just talked about Saturn transiting to natal Saturn, but Saturn is also obviously going to transit other planets in your chart. And usually a Saturn transit lasts for, if you get three direct hits, like during the retrograde, I would say for about a year, 1.5 years, something like that.
Yeah,
So it's a longer period if you're getting a Saturn return to a natal placement. And I think that's just good to know that it's also
totally.
a longer story. It's not the moon that passes
Yeah, just like
quickly in a day.
drives by and says hello and then I'll be back next week. Yeah, exactly.
So I think that's good to note here as well. Okay, so we're back from another small break. We're gonna talk about the last segment now, which is gonna consist of talking about Saturn and medical astrology and talking a bit about the theme on the birth chart, although I think we covered quite a lot about that before. And we're gonna kind of close it off with talking about how to build a relationship with Saturn, and then at the end of the episodes, I let all of my guests recite the Orphic hymn to the planets. So this is gonna be how we're gonna close it off. And yes, so Saturn in medical astrology. Saturn rules over skin, over teeth, over bones, basically everything that gives structure to the body, and also skin. Saturn also rules over skin, which I think is fascinating considering the fact that the skin is like the biggest boundary our body has between like the
What
outer
keeps
world
it
and the inner
in?
world.
Yeah.
Uh, so that is there. Obviously, there's some affinities with like Capricorn ruling over the parts of the knees, and then Aquarius, the ankles. And I think we touched upon this somewhere before, but Saturn is also chronic diseases. Mars is, diseases that come and go quickly, things like fevers and being sick and inflammation. And just like, there's annoying things that like kind of set you back. Saturn is this same thing, but like long term. So chronic
Yes.
diseases. So things that set you back longer time or that you have to learn to deal with to manage throughout your life on the long run. If it is just a chronic disease that becomes manageable and you get to like learn to live with that. Yes. You wrote something here that Demetra George said, so I'm not gonna let you.
Oh yeah, yeah. I was just consulting the Queen Demetra and Saturn rules in one of her volumes on ancient astrology. Saturn rules the thighs, knees, lymph, kidneys, bladder, hidden injuries, which I think is interesting given the relationship with the 12th house, and gout. So rotting, putrid, difficult things where, the Saturnian means might require, or the Saturnian event might require a martial means, i.e., possibly having to amputate or separate something from the body because
Yeah.
it's rotted. So again, that malefic relationship in play in the medical stuff here. But it's also lymph and fascia of the body, like the connective tissue, like you're saying, Saturn rules everything that gives the body structure. And I think it's really interesting and fascinating. I mean, as a very Saturnian person, I've been doing Qigong for almost 10 years now. I've been, like dabbling in it, and over the last like 5 or 6 got really serious with it. But I do it to move my muscles and my lymphatic system every single day. I gotta do it, and it holds so much grief.
Mm,
And the fascia of the body and connective tissue can often also hold grief or be where we hold on to our more intense, or like, banish our more intense emotional experiences too. And so if you struggle with things that are Saturnian or have a tough Saturn or notice it in your life, I highly, highly recommend those practices that also often do not give you results in a day. Like Qigong, I noticed what it does to my body and my psyche and how I feel over a long period of time. And so it's these little things that we have to really be disciplined in and commit to that can help the body, like you're saying with chronic illness, like little ways we can mitigate over time.
yes, and I think this is also probably going to be the most prominent with people that either have Saturn in the sixth house, probably also Saturn in the 12th house, or that have Capricorn or Aquarius rule over their sixth house, because that means it's going to be a Saturn ruled house. These are issues that you could find present. I'm specifically talking about the sixth house here because that's often where disease and sickness and illness come
Totally.
about. At the same time, it also is often the solution that is shown there as well. And yeah, you're bringing up a good point. There's always also ways, and I feel like that's also like a good Saturn, like a good Saturn can help
Yeah.
with having the capacity to endure something for for a long time and be able to overcome these like struggles and diseases and find new ways and there's also what did I say again? Like, yeah, a Saturn like remedy can also be like yeah, going to a remote retreat or undertaking a healing pilgrimage somewhere where you are like on the move and you're pondering the meaning of life. I mean, there's that's what people oftentimes do, where you're like, life is just too much. I need to go somewhere far away to realize what I actually need to do. Otherwise, like I'm gonna get like really, really sick and that it's not that it's not gonna be okay anymore. And
Yes.
I think yeah, Saturn certainly has a lot to do with like asceticism or just like having routines. I think that what you said with qigong. Sorry, I say qigong,
That you
but
said, yeah, that's right.
yeah, and I kind of do. I don't do qigong, but I do like I would say asanas every day, and like it's the same for me.
Yeah.
It's like if I don't do them a couple of days, like then you notice the good effects of
Exactly.
them.
And this is not, I don't want to come in here and be like, that'll fix everything. Because it's like,
Yeah.
that'll do it. It won't. But for more manageable things or things that you feel like you have control over, because also Saturn is the boundary or relationship between what we can control and what we cannot, and how we accept what we can't control. And I think that goes for health as well, and like disability as well, or difference in ability, which definitely I feel like just should be addressed in terms of like chronic illness. We can't always like breathe our way through it or like morning exercise our way through it. Sometimes it is just it knocks us on our ass and we need more, stronger means, um,
Mm,
etc. But I think Saturn shows you where the little things are that you can control and manage if you do, need to regulate your body, which like realistically everybody does. You know, um, yeah, I,
agreed. Yeah. Yeah, and I think the thing with chronic disease is right, they don't show up out of nowhere. It's something that has
totally.
been building up for years,
Yeah.
usually through um I'm gonna say like stereotypical doctor things right now, but stress and unhealthy diets and not moving enough. But these
Yeah.
are things that contribute to that. Like I'm sure there's other things as well, and emotional trauma
Stagnancy.
and everything that like
Yeah.
comes there. And yeah, stagnancy is a good word. That for me, that is like Saturn in Cancer territory, you know?
Yes. Yes.
It's
So
water that
true.
cannot move. And what did I want to say? Oh, yeah, Saturn transits, like if Saturn, I don't know, goes through a sixth house, goes through eighth house, I don't know, some of these difficult houses, actually, it can even help you with setting boundaries with these things.
A
Like
hundred
there's
percent.
sometimes people like Saturn going through the eighth house, they're like, I'm gonna quit drinking, smoking, doing substances. I'm going sober. Uh, I'm
Yeah.
gonna detangle myself from addiction. That's the word that I
Yeah.
was searching for, or being dependent on someone or something else. That's like eighth house territory. And yeah, or again with sixth house, it can be like Saturn going through a sixth house, and it's like you take your daily routines a lot more seriously, and you're like, I have to take care of myself first and do the little things and
Yes.
wake up and do my exercises because that's gonna be good for me. So this is what Saturn can really, how it can really positively benefit our lives by setting like good boundaries that are beneficial for our health in the long run. Even though,
Definitely.
right, we never have a guarantee you can be the healthiest person and something still genetically shows up. And so
Totally.
that is definitely also reality. I don't want to bypass that.
I know. I always hesitate. But no, I think that's so real because also Saturn can show up as those things that we do not expect, even though we've been taking
Hmm.
such good
Hmm.
care of ourselves. And yeah, I do geomancy as well. And all the geomantic figures are in the system that I use are expressions of kind of like
Hmm.
two faces of the traditional astrological planet. And I think about the two phases of Saturn that are represented in geomancy are Tristitia, which is kind of like the internal Saturn, and the Aries Saturn, and those anxieties and ruminations, again, like ruminating can cause stagnancy and illness in the body. And that's a huge, anxiety is a Saturnian thing. And then Carcer is the external Saturn, which represents external issues or limitations that we face. And something that I always practice for my own, and again, this is not going to be an exhaustive remedy, but something that I like to recommend to people who are interested in astrological herbalism, or just herbalism in general. Skullcap is my lifesaver. Skullcap is a Saturnian herb, but it's also a nervine. And I really, she's a lifesaver for disrupting patterns of rumination internally that you might deal with if you are a very Saturnian person. I cannot recommend it enough, but I just think about how like that is an internal anxiety is an internal representation of Saturn, and ruminations are internal Saturn, whereas, other limitations that our bodies might experience that are out of our control are that very external Saturn. So it's, again, the opposition comes up because it's all about finding the balance between what we can control and what we can't, which I just feel like was inherent to our conversation.
Oh,
Just about
yeah.
like health and bodies in general. That's
I love that.
always
Yeah.
the thing. Um, yeah,
And I think it's something very realistic that people usually come to with consultations or have questions about that, right? It's,
Yes,
people don't,
totally.
people usually don't get a consultation and are like, my life is amazing. Can you tell me why
I
my
feel
life is so
normal.
amazing right now?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's like, no, like my life is shit. Something is limiting me. Something is going
Right.
on. And there is a lot of people that come with health issues, and obviously there's a whole section of medical astrology. In ancient times, they were pretty much inseparable. As a previous medical nurse, it's a deep fascination of mine, medical astrology,
Yes.
of course, and I did also dabble in astroherbalism. So I think it's actually great that you brought it up. I feel like I should have like way more Saturnian remedies right now in my head, but I don't.
No,
Uh,
I don't either. I'm like, all right, skull cap. But I really think that that is the one that I have utilized that always does me good. As a very Saturnian person, and it's funny the idea of balancing Saturn with more Saturn. But it really disrupts those kind of like panic attacks and thought
oh yeah.
patterns, shockingly effectively, depending on your propensity or constitution. It's going to be different for everybody. Um, but for
Yeah,
me, I just love it.
yeah, I think I mean magnesium and calcium certainly is also I don't know if it's a remedy, but
No, a
it's
supplement.
something. It's a
Yeah,
supplement,
yeah.
yes,
I
because
I
it
take
can
magnesium and calcium
yeah.
calcium as a Saturnian person. I'm like, especially of with a fallen Saturn, if you have a fallen Saturn, remedies associated with Saturn, getting more Saturn in the mix in your body to support those structures can help.
Oh yeah. Yeah, yeah, you also said you drank some bone broth in the morning. That's so Saturnian in and of itself.
I did it specifically for this. Yeah, I was like, all right, Saturn, I need my bone broth.
So drink your bone broth, guys. And would you also made me think of another plant that is I think also maybe specifically helpful for Saturn and Aries folks. Uh and I know we're like kind of putting ourselves very much into this, but
To be fair, this is coming out when Saturn enters into Aries.
exactly. So it might be a remedy for everyone.
Exactly.
But I think rose is such a Saturn and Libra
Mm,
plant.
that's so real.
And that can be, I mean, I have been working with rose a lot as of last year, and it has been very, very helpful in my life and like kind of
Yes.
calming that down. And I mean, I generally like to work with Venus because I feel like I have a lot of malefic signatures, so I really benefit from working with the benefics a bit more and like chilling out a bit and
I feel
doing
the
the
same.
Venusian things.
Yeah.
And rose is very, very helpful for that. And again, you think about the rose, like we think about the flower, but the stem is here and has its thorns, it has its boundaries, and so I think it's
Saturn
very
rules
Libra.
thorny
Hmm.
things, according to Ibn Ezra. Yeah,
Yes. So again, a beautiful remedy, I think, for the world in the
absolutely.
upcoming years.
Yeah.
Yeah, is there anything else to say about that?
I have nothing.
Okay, well, I think I'm like reading the things with the Thema Mundi birth chart and like the opposition, and I'm like, I feel like we said everything
I do think,
about
yeah, I
this. So
absolutely.
we can literally just and I we've already been kind of talking about this, but just like even more specifically on how to build a relationship with Saturn, like and I really want this to be like very practical because for me, and I'm sure for you as well, that's the beauty of being in relationship with the planets is doing
Yep.
so on a day-to-day basis on a
Yeah,
very like practical level, and practical is also a very Saturnian word where you
totally.
can like really just experience and feel Saturn, and especially experience and feel like the very like positive sides of Saturn, so you can understand and grasp like the goodness of this planet. And because again, there's a lot of like there's too much Saturn shame and hate out there that I just cannot vibe with, and I think Saturn needs a lot more love for all the like also good things it's doing in our lives and perpetuating in our lives as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's I mean, the first thing that I immediately jump to, I'm like, volunteer with your local hospice. Like sit bedside with people who are dying. And I know that that doesn't
Mm,
sound like a fun and loving and exciting expression of Saturn, but really like finding the beauty in death, and trying to work on your own relationship with death. That is something that there are people who facilitate that. I host death meditations to try to bring people into relationship with that in an accessible way, but also, building relationships with elders in your community. I mean, I think that is now as important as ever because
Oh yeah.
there are older generations who have experienced and seen a lot of shit who can give us a lot of wisdom and really kind of like humble our generation as well. But I think building relationship with elders in your community and older people and valuing the older people in your life and really like figuring out how can I show up for people who are older in my life in these times. And also, yeah, like bashing back against death denial in general. That is a Saturnian practice. So, reading about death, it doesn't always have to be doom and gloom. Death can be really beautiful, and experiencing the death of someone that is mindful, and even though it's hard, being present for that and sitting with that challenge, that's Saturn remediation. And it might not be accessible or exciting or interesting to everybody, but even just finding a way to safely imagine or think about your own death, like writing up your will or your advance directive or planning your funeral. Um, I'm a freak, but that's all very exciting to me. So, make a playlist of songs that you want played at your funeral. That's Saturn
That's great. I love
remediation.
that.
You could do
I
that
love that.
any old time, you know. Yeah, also for me, sorry, I'm keep on rattling, but
Oh,
like
good.
my face has changed over the last few years of my life, and I see my age now, which is crazy to say as a 28-year-old, I recognize. But sitting with that and observing that and like loving new lines on my face or like new gray hairs that I have seen. First, I'm like, okay, I'm stressed. And then I'm like, oh, I made it. Like I survived
Mm.
long enough. You survived long enough to see yourself age. Incredible. Accepting that and cherishing that. That is Saturn remediation. Go outside during the winter. Go to the beach in winter. That's Saturn remediation. Look at the patterns on dead trees. Experience joy and love for dead things. That's all so Saturnian, and you all have to do it right now.
Saturn and Aries, do it right.
Yeah, do it yesterday.
You have to write your will right now.
That's really that is how I feel, unfortunately. It's so Saturn in Aries. Yeah, I don't mean to proselytize, but I think these things are a lot more accessible than we think, and the
Oh yeah, they're
sooner,
super accessible.
yeah, sooner we face our fears about them, the more equipped we will be to embrace them in a way that doesn't feel scary.
Yeah, when I was in medical school, they told us like you should write a will now, because
Yeah.
and not because, but it's really just because you never know when things are gonna happen, and that's, I think. Thinking about death is bringing power back to you and how you want to die. And that is very empowering, actually. Even if it sounds maybe silly saying it that way.
No, it's
But I think,
beautiful.
but I think that's also like the reason why I think like even in families, if you can, I'm certainly aware that not everybody can talk to their families, or their family members are willing to talk about these things. But if you can, like actually, talking about that can be very empowering, like knowing how the will is going to be distributed. So it's not a surprise when it just happens. Knowing, like, do you know what your grandmother wants from you when she's
Right.
at her deathbed? Like, talk to her about that, because that can actually make this part that we all must go through at some point a lot more, I mean, I don't know if enjoyable, but just, a lot more safe.
It's
A lot more
smoother.
safe. Yeah,
It's safer and it's smoother. Yeah.
exactly. And again, I certainly would feel a lot more empowered knowing that I kind of like planned my death or could contribute to that and know what's gonna happen or what I would like to happen.
Yeah. And I think this is also how Saturn relates to like the idea of belonging to a larger structure. It's like when you set up your loved ones um for success after you're gone so that they don't have to scramble and guess and feel like they're maybe getting it wrong. It shows that you understand that you are in relationship and you are living inside of the same structure of your relationship, and it's actually a very kind thing to do for someone is to tell them exactly what you want. Disposition method. Do you want to be buried? Do you want to be aquamated? Just start thinking about it. Like fantasize about what you would want, and what that kind of like respect would look like for you. Um, it doesn't have to be morbid. Uh, yeah, I could go off on a tangent on this forever.
I
But
agree. Yeah, there's a lot to be said about that. But
yeah,
certainly, I think it's important, like talk about that because things can happen unexpectedly, and it's good if you know because otherwise, a lot of people feel very clueless and powerless if somebody like passes away in their family, and it's like they're like, I don't know what my father would have wanted. Like now it's in my hands, and like
yeah.
I have to decide, and I think it's a lot more beautiful if you spoke about that before and there's like an agreement or you know what your I'm just using as an example for the father, but like what your father would have wanted. I
It
think
feels
it's
more intimate too.
yes.
Um, yeah, I also think that something that, you know, Saturnian remediation is acknowledging that loss and grief doesn't just look like physical death. I think making space and room for ambiguous loss or like disenfranchised grief, meaning griefs and losses that look non-traditional, even like pet death that I think a lot of people don't really take seriously enough, or like a change in housing or job or a loss of a
Mm.
friendship or situational grief that might, you might be like, oh, I feel like I'm grieving, and people are like, nobody died. Like making space for those experiences that
Hmm.
other people are having and accepting those as grief that involves or that is deserving of ceremony in your life. Like if you are struggling with letting something go, I was just talking about someone with this yesterday, have a mini funeral for it. Like have a
Hmm.
funeral
Hmm.
for your house that you have to move out of, or your friendship that kind of fizzled out and you miss that person and you know you won't talk again. Like we need ceremony, and like engaging with that ceremony with just day-to-day things that still bring grief into your life. That's very Saturnian. um, Saturn wants the pomp and circumstance, maybe not the pomp but the circumstance, for sure.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and there's I mean there are rituals where you can literally get as a ritual you get buried.
Yes,
And that is personally I haven't done it but my mom did it and that has been very powerful. I mean I wasn't present there. I was
but
a bit
it's powerful if it
it's
echoed
powerful,
so much
yes.
through her life that you know how powerful it was. That's
Absolutely,
awesome.
absolutely. But both of my parents were like yogis, still are. But my mom has lived a very ascetic life, meditating in the graveyard during the night. So, so
That's Saturn remediation. I love
that's
that
a
for her
Saturn
and about her.
remediation.
It's fabulous.
100%. And I don't want to open up this whole new box, but I think it's worth kind of talking a bit about here. Uh, because there's lots of opinions to be had about that. But I think what's unique here about Switzerland is that you can have assisted death. uh,
Yeah.
and, you know, there's many people that have many opinions about that, and I fully get that. But it is also, I think it can be very empowering if you can decide when you want to go. And I am for that. And I think what most people don't understand about that, and when they hear this for the first time, is they're like, oh, they're just gonna let 14-year-olds gonna go like kill themselves. Like, no,
Not how
no,
that
no, Sharon,
works,
they're not
but
gonna do
yeah,
that.
totally. Yeah.
It's a whole process before it's even decided. It's not just happening like that in one day. There's a lot of protocols and things, and there's been like whole cases where there was like an amputee and he couldn't inject the thing into him, and then he couldn't do it or because like you have to be able to inject the whole thing into yourself. But to not make this whole talk go into that direction, it's just I think that can
I'm
also
like,
be
don't threaten me with a good time.
a a very empowering thing if you can decide where and how you want to die and pass away and who you want to have around yourself.
Yes,
Um, yep,
totally. And
totally.
I
So,
think even what you're saying, experience or making the consideration of where you stand, even in ethics of death and like
mm-hmm,
MAID, like I consider MAID all the time and consider the nuances and the strengths of it and how much dignity it can offer people. But like I listen to people talk about that and I'm like, oh, I'm engaging with Saturn right now
mm-hmm,
because
mm-hmm,
I
mm-hmm.
am reinforcing or trying to inform my own internal structure about how I feel about death. Like just think more about these possibilities, entertain more. Yeah, what would the right death look like for you, even if it's not the ideal death, but under the circumstances? That's like what my teacher who I train with, Ilua Arthur, is like a good death likely won't exist. So what's the best death for you? And I
Mm-hmm.
think whether you are in training or working in death work or not, that's absolutely, like you're saying, something that like it can even feel comforting to consider. Um, yeah.
Agreed, agreed. So yeah, if you want to connect to Saturn, connect to death and dying.
Hey, have fun. Have fun and be yourself, is what I would say.
Yeah, you also wrote here finding beauty in dead things and the it's kind of riffing off the same thing. But I would say a lot of like lost places, abandoned places, that is such a Saturnian thing. Like exploring
Yes.
that, like going to abandoned mansions, hospitals. Like if you haven't done that yet, highly recommend. It's such a liminal space to be somewhere where there used to be a lot of things going on. Like you can almost feel the history of it. That is also one way that you can connect with Saturn. And then you
Yeah.
also said spending time in nature, 100%. I also added here that I like the image or again the literalism of like snow being on pine needles. I think for me that's a very like Capricorn Aquarius, both of them fusion together, like Capricorn
Mm.
symbolizing the actual tree and the stem, and then Aquarius being that snow, that water that is on the tree. And like bearing that weight, it's like the nature also has weight on itself during that time. Isn't that
Yeah.
fascinating? And just like
I
kind of
love that.
connecting to that. And I also last year I was in a forest, but it was in winter, and I found this like huge boulder, and my first instinct was I just want to lie on that boulder and experience that like eternal feeling of just like being held by that stone that has been here for thousands of years that is
Yes.
Saturnian.
I also exactly, and when I feel my worst in the summer, my number one thing is I go lie on a rock and I
Heck
meditate and
yeah.
I pretend I am the rock. I become
I
the
love that.
rock. And I'm like, yes, like you're saying, I've been here for thousands of years. I've been here for, oh, an eon. I also, when I am particularly ruminative, I love deep time and like deep time geology. And I do a time walk where I think it's like each step, I used to do this a lot more, each step represents 100 years. And if you walk with each step representing a century, it would take you 20 miles, I think it is, to get to the beginning of time. So if you are feeling Saturnian ruminations out the wazoo and feeling extremely overwhelmed by your circumstances, sometimes thinking of the depth of time is a really good Saturnian exercise to situate you on the wheel of history. Where on the clock of time am I right now? Is like the big
Mm,
resonating question in that moment, and you're simply a blip, which is divine and fantastic and should hopefully be comforting and not minimizing. But yeah, the world and Earth has been here for so long, and figuring out a way to feel that in your body is like such a Saturnian acceptance
Mm,
exercise.
yeah. Yeah, it's the same thing I feel when I read like books by authors that aren't alive for many
Yes,
years ago. And it's
exactly.
almost like a meme, right? Of this like, oh, a philosopher said the same thing 2000 years ago. But it's
It's
for me that's not
amazing.
a bad thing. I'm like, yes, and somebody 2000 years after me will also have the exact same emotional experience and conclusion, and
Exactly.
that's kind of beautiful that we're all like coming to that same like place in this weird human life of experience and
Yeah.
realizing that thing. Like, isn't that so cool? Like the eternity that connects us all, like that is also very Saturnian for sure.
It makes me love being alive. I can tell you that
Yeah,
much. It is so incredible
agreed.
to like laugh at something that Jane Austen wrote. I am like, yeah, that's my girl. She's hilarious. We people have been laughing at the same shit for eons.
Exactly, exactly. And then there's also, I can't believe we didn't even say that, but just like on a very simple term, okay? Saturn, it rules over Saturn Day, Saturday.
Oh,
So be,
Oh, Saturday.
exactly, like connecting with Saturn during Saturn's day, and ideally during Saturn's hour, which you can find on numerous apps. I always recommend Time Nomad because it's going to time it
I
exactly
love
for
her.
your time zone. And usually, again, I recite the Orphic hymn or something like that. You don't have to. I think most of the planets are just happy that we are even taking initiative to connect with them. So obviously, that is also like doing all the activities we just said, like additionally on Saturday, like that's gonna even up level it one step
Yeah.
further.
Wear
Yes.
black and put on your patchouli oil on a Saturday. That's Saturn worship, baby.
Yeah. Oh, and talking about oils, I mean, it's so funny because I only since the Jupiter episode I started to shout out spheres and sundry, but I
Oh, of
put this
course.
like Capricorn, the goats. Oh my gosh, phalanges. I do not know how to pronounce that word.
Perfect.
But just having like Saturn ruled materia, like on an
Yeah,
astromagic level, like that can also really help you or be a
totally.
Saturn remediation in and of itself. Yeah, and I think Saturn is that planet that people would mostly go for remediation for because
Yeah,
it's usually what they think is causing all their problems in their lives.
definitely.
And I agree. Sometimes it is also Mars, though. Like, don't underestimate Mars. But
Sometimes it is also Mars.
I think it's once we step away from looking at like, oh, Saturn's like, I don't know, up there like plotting our demise, like that's not happening. Like just like sit down and talk to Saturn and be like, what are you trying to teach me? Like, what is this all about?
Yeah.
Saturn was actually the first planet I started to build a relationship with. I mean, I would argue maybe the moon before that, but like from the planets it was Saturn actually, and it was during that like Saturn closing Saturn square time that I started to get into a relationship with Saturn, and I got really curious about Saturn because I was like, I can this cannot be my life. Like there is like I need to like I need to go talk. And I already before that I was already like in relationship to again, when I say God, I really don't mean it in a Christian way. I didn't grow up Christian at all. I mean it more in like a divine beloved type of way. It's it's a feminine force for me out there. But like I already started to build a relationship to that. And I was like, well, I can probably also just build a relationship to that Saturn. Like I can just like why don't I just ask Saturn? And
Totally.
and that was like life shifting for me. And
Yeah.
then I started gradually to do it with also all the other planets, and it really like completely changed my approach to astrology, why I do astrology, how I show up with astrology, and that's mostly thanks to Saturn. So
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. I when I need to pray for self-discipline or the will to get
Saturn.
through something, Saturn is the number one planet I call on. But also when I need, ironically, bravery, or when I need to realistically
Hmm?
look at my fear, Like when I need the strength to look into the dark, Saturn is
Yeah.
it. Because oftentimes Saturn can be that, like clothes pile in the corner that looks like a scary guy when the lights are off and you turn it on and you're like, oh, wait, that's not a demon, that's my chair. Um,
Yeah.
you know.
It's I think it's a lot the devil's card from tarot, which of course, it's Capricorn, so
Yeah, absolutely. But also, my relationship with the Devil card has changed so much since I started working with Saturn because
I can
now
imagine.
I see these little figures looking up at this great beast and they're like, "Oh my God, how beautiful. Like how
I love
gorgeous
that.
is this creature? How powerful." Like what Saturn shows you what it takes to embody that.
Heck yeah. Is there any other thing about building a relationship to Saturn that we want to add?
I think that covers it for me.
For sure. I mean, there's always things that
There will always be more.
there will always be more.
And that's also not like all of this is not exhaustive. Uh,
Agreed. Yeah.
somehow.
Yeah. So I think we can go towards the Orphic hymn and start
Fabulous.
closing it off. Oh, you have the book. That's amazing.
I have the book and I have it bookmarked to be prepared.
I love that. That's usually I think everyone until now just read it from the internet, which is fine. But I love that you
It's
have the
fine.
book.
Um,
That feels Saturnian in and of itself.
you took the words right out of my mouth. Yeah, I do think it's the Saturn in me. Um, should I go for it?
Go for it.
Okay, perfect. Ethereal Father, mighty Titan, hear, great fire of gods and men whom all revere, endured with various counsel, pure and strong, to whom perfection and decrease belong. Consumed by thee all forms that hourly die, by thee restored their former place supply. The world immense in everlasting chains, strong and ineffable thy power contains. Father of vast eternity divine, O mighty Saturn, various speech is thine, blossom of earth and of the starry skies, husband of Rhea and Prometheus' wife, obstetric nature, venerable root, from which the various forms of being shoot. No parts peculiar can thy power enclose, diffused through all, from which the world arose. O best of beings of a subtle mind, propitious here to holy prayers inclined, the sacred rites benevolent attend, and grant a blameless life, a blessed end.
I love that last part so much.
It makes me cry a little bit every time. It's so beautiful.
Yeah, it's like what could you ask Saturn but to bless you with a good end of life? Like
Exactly.
that's so beautiful. Um, yeah, okay, so we're coming to the end part where I'm gonna ask you to well, not introduce yourself again, but basically tell people where they can find you and if there's any, I don't know, workshops or anything you want to shout out, feel free to do so.
Yeah, you can find me at abyssarcanum.com or at abyssarcanum on Instagram. Um, I do all sorts of readings. I have Saturn return readings, and I do death meditations. I try to do them monthly, and usually it's pay what you can because I want to make sure that everyone can participate in death awareness. So, if you follow me, look out for those. I always love doing those, but. Yeah, if there's anything else, I can't think of it right now, but that's what I got.
Yeah, that's good. Well, I'm definitely gonna, all the links, as always, will be down in the description below. And if you're listening this, you're listening at the Resonance Astrology podcast. You're either on YouTube or on Spotify right now. So both of these parts, if you're on either, you can go follow the other one. And you can find me everywhere under Resonance Astrology, my website, my Instagram. Where I'm mostly active on YouTube and on Instagram. And yeah, this is Well, we're kind of closing this off with the last of the seven inner planets, and after that, we're entering the realm of the outer planets. So the episodes after that are going to be about the outers, which is going to be a completely different energy. Um, but I'm always excited talking about all of the planets. There's no planet that I like love more than another one, and it's been so fun until now like getting to the energy of each one of them. Like that's the thing that's most exciting to me. And I really hope we could bring Saturn closer to you and make you appreciate this planet that is sadly often very misunderstood, in my opinion, in a very unjust justifiable way. And yeah, hopefully you can build a much better and healthier relationship to Saturn through that. And if you do, like, feel free to leave a comment, or maybe a half year from now, like text us on Instagram, tell us tell us how you started to build a relationship to Saturn. Like I would love to hear
Please.
about that.
Absolutely.
Great. Yeah, so that's all I have. And with this, I'm gonna say goodbye to everyone.
Thank you for having me. Bye, everyone.